Don't any of you have the guts to play for blood?
I'm your huckleberry. That's just my game.
What's up, everybody? Derek Lambert here, host of Myth Vision Podcast. I am joined to my side here, Derek Bennett, same Derek name, spelled a little different. And he is the host of the YouTube channel. I got Durante Lamar up, actually. Atheologica here. So he's covered quite a bit of content. Derek's a good friend of mine for many years now. And he has covered, the questions of did Jesus exist? He goes into so many different critical videos on it. And then we are also joined by the legend. I call the legend Dan Barker here. Welcome to Myth Vision, Dan. Yeah, it's great to see you again. And Dan's done debates. I mean, I watched your video on Oprah. I mean, this goes way back. You have a website here, freedomfromreligionfoundation.org. Tell us a little bit about this, if you don't mind, and we'll dive into the topic at hand.
It's ffrf.org. Yeah, the Freedom from Religion Foundation we're close to 50 years now, working to keep state and church separate. We have a big legal team, attorneys. We file lawsuits and write letters of complaint. And we also exist to educate the public about the views of those of us who are non-theist, non-religious, whatever we call ourselves. Atheist, agnostic, secular humanist, igtheist, and our joke is we don't care what we call ourselves. We all disbelieve in the same God, so it doesn't matter. So we like the umbrella word free thinker. Free thinker is kind of a nice umbrella for all of these different labels, whatever, We are non-theists and we educate. And part of the educational work that we do is, besides our newspaper and our national radio show, and now we have a new streaming app, by the way, called Free Thought TV. If you have a smart TV like Samsung or Roku or something, but part of it is public education, meaning I get to do a lot of public speaking and debates. Next week, I'll be doing my 142nd formal public moderated debate.
How many?
142. That sounds like a lot, but
it is.
It is, but the first one was 1985, so that's like about 4 a year. It comes out to.
I'm just Derek. I'm muting your mic. Your audio is coming through pretty loud. Your camera disappeared too, by the way, brother. Just giving you a heads up. I don't know what happened to you. Sorry, Dan. It's got to be Satan that's trying to stop us here,
or maybe God's man. So anyway, on February 6th, I'll actually be debating not at a university, but at a big church in Dallas at an apologetics conference. And most of the audience will be apologists, theologians, Christian arguers, and all that. And they're bringing me in, I guess, to be their punching bag to to show them how to debate an atheist. I love doing that kind of stuff. So then I have another one coming up in April which will be televised in Canada on national TV. And I have debated the resurrection, but it's been years since I actually dug deep into it. Most of it is, does God exist? Next week, the topic is more narrow. Does the God of the Bible exist? That's actually an easier debate. You can forget about all the philosophy stuff and just talk about the God of the Bible. But
right.
And then I do music too. I just got back from a 2-week, 6-event tour, California, Washington, and Utah, speaking to different groups. And in most of them, I got to play the piano and sing some of my irreverent music.
I love it. You're really good at the piano, by the way. There's videos of you playing, and I thought that was impressive. Derek, are you back? Are you there? Your video's not here, man.
My video's not there.
Yeah, we don't see you.
Ha! That stinks. why don't I slide out of here and see if I can't come back better?
Yeah, come back better, because I want to
Okay.
get your 2 cents here. I'll start the conversation here with you, Dan, because this whole issue of, Christianity wanting to say that the resurrection happened. I'm going to switch sides here with you for a second here. So I look like I'm looking at you, or at least toward you. You've been debating this for decades. There were heroes before you that were already challenging these ideas, that were clearly questioning this material. And so I thought, for real, I titled it, "Why should anyone believe Jesus rose from the dead?"
Well,
And
they want to.
yeah, they want to.
Well, you need, in order to have a really powerful religion, you need miracles. You need these great stories. If there were no miracles in it, it would just be a how to live your life philosophy kind of thing. But miracles are central to the claims of theism, this powerful God. And of course, the resurrection is not just a miracle, not just a proof, but it's also a hope. If Jesus rose from the dead, well, then so can we. So it's integral. And even Paul said, if Christ wasn't risen, then our faith's in vain, right? That's really critical. So it has to be, quote unquote, it has to be real in their minds in order for their whole faith to make any existence at all. And by the way, I've done a lot of debates, but I'm not a professional philosopher,
right,
or theologian. I have a degree in religion from a Christian college, but I'm just a former preacher who just likes to talk about this stuff. So
I get it. I'm not a PhD either. Derek, your visuals are here, my friend.
Hey.
I feel like I didn't give you due justice by just promoting the YouTube channel. I hope people go subscribe, of course, to your YouTube channel, A Theologica. But let's begin this discussion. Let's start talking about the resurrection. And if you don't mind, Derek, with the insights you have, because I know you may not be able to stay as long as maybe Dan or whatnot, but what are some of the problems you find with needing to believe that this happened? And what angle do you approach this that makes you go, dude, no, no, it didn't happen. And here's why we should be completely cautious and question that this ever happened.
So I began my foray into religion and philosophy by really becoming fascinated with the topic of comparative religion. Looking at other ancient myths, legends, stories from the past, other philosophies even, and just modes of thinking from antiquity. And I'll just tear this off like a Band-Aid. The resurrection of Jesus fits very neatly, squarely within a range of stories, tales, myths, and so forth, in which divine or semi-divine figures were raised up after death, or at a particularly dramatic endpoint to their mortal lives, and they're taken up and they are transformed into something more than what they used to be. They're no longer a mortal human being that can ever die again. They are deified. They turn into gods, essentially. It's God-making is what that is, or apotheosis is the technical word for it. Notice that with the resurrection of Jesus, he's not just reanimated like Lazarus, right? He's not just returned to mortal life. He is raised up and highly exalted, made more powerful than ever before. He takes up his throne in his heavenly kingdom, and that was pretty much the archetype or template for many figures, both historical figures and mythical figures who experience some kind of resurrection or apotheosis or exaltation. I mean, it is par for the course. It looks very much like the kind of mythology that we would expect from that day and that time and age.
And so the suggested conclusion is, why not the 100 others, right?
Right.
Or at least notice that they don't take serious those others. There is clearly a special pleading that typically occurs, no matter what. It forces them. And for me, I have more respect, at least for the ones who try to at least go, okay, you got me. You got me. Okay. I got to take serious Asclepius. All right, I got to take Dionysus serious. Heracles, let's take him serious. Come on. And the various other demigods, or even the Caesars, who were seen walking roads on Roman roads after they were dead. We have primary sources from the first century to second century of people claiming they saw the Caesars on roads. Tell me that doesn't sound like the road to Emmaus. I mean, so there's something wrong, I think, in this one is true. And if they at least said, look, I think all of them are doing miracles, or they try to be, because they say we're closed off to the supernatural, Dan. They say, we don't believe in the supernatural. We're so close-minded. And it's like, as soon as you go, okay, so you think the Epidaurian tablets with Asclepius Hillings, those happened, right? And they're like, no. That was BS. And it's like, oh, who's closed-minded now? Like, you don't accept those miracles, but you accept only yours. Isn't that odd?
Yeah, I mean, people, here in the modern age.
I'd like to hear your
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
No, I'm
Derek,
I'm still on.
if you were trying to talk, I couldn't hear you.
Well, when I was a preacher, I used to say that those were just pale imitations. Those stories may have even had some truth to them, but that the Christian story, of course, is ultimate truth. And I think we have to acknowledge, even we skeptics, that just because the Jesus story appears to be cut from the same fabric as all these other ancient myths, that fact alone doesn't mean it's false, right? I mean, there is a what is the word, probability or likelihood that any of them, including the Christian one, maybe was true. So you're right, Derek. Derek L, is that it? That we've been accused of being closed-minded when in fact we're just simply being careful. We're being cautious in what we accept. We're not saying it's a zero. I wouldn't say the resurrection is zero probability, but it's so low that I think we can safely relegate it to highly unlikely.
Hey, Dan, I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me? With a nod, if you can hear me.
You can't hear
okay.
me?
Whatever's going on, the devil himself has entered the room, obviously, because my audio is funky right now, and I don't understand what's going on. Can you hear me?
I do hear you, but you don't hear me?
This
No?
is so weird because I've got my ear. I do hear you. Now I hear you, but you're coming through my computer, and I got my headphones on, like my earbuds. Then I put them in, and then it plays you through there. I take them out to have you play through here, and then everything's silent again. And it's like, it makes no sense. I missed that last part you were saying, and Derek's visuals went away, by the way. So Derek's not even, we can't even see your face anymore, Derek.
He's in outer darkness, maybe. He lives.
Can you recap what you said? Because I was mute until you blessed me with hearing again.
Can I remember? I don't know if I remember what I said. I ended with the thought that we skeptics are not just flatly denying the possibility of the supernatural. We just relegate it to a very low probability, and so it requires much more proof. And in the mind of most believers, some of them are more sophisticated. It's either true or false, right? But we think many of these historical claims fall across a continuum of probability. I think the stories about Abraham Lincoln, the probability is way up here, but the stories of the stories of Hercules and their probability is way down here. So as long as we're careful to say we're open, maybe you can come up with more evidence, but we are justified in our skepticism at this point. We're not saying no. Maybe there are some skeptics who say 0%. Maybe. I would say, maybe 5%, or maybe that's even way too high. But we are not closed-minded in the sense that they think we are. Yeah,
I agree. Derek, did you catch that? Did you have a response to some of this?
No, I absolutely did, and Dan's right. I mean, the technical term for the kind of analysis that you do in this case is Bayesian logic or Bayesian reasoning, right? You try to determine what is the prior probability of an occurrence. That's what you do initially. So when you look at something like the resurrection of Jesus, when you see that, this doesn't really comport with what we actually see in the real world, right? People don't tend to rise up out of their graves and then shoot up into the sky. But we do see this template over and over and over again in ancient mythology. What does that tell you? I mean, in terms of probability alone, it sure looks like an ancient myth. It doesn't look like anything that we experience in the here and now. So that is probably what it is.
Yeah, so that lowers the probability.
Right.
That fact lowers the probability.
Right. And then you take into account whatever evidence or lack thereof might raise the probability, right? I mean, if there are extenuating circumstances, if there is evidential reason to think that Jesus was, or Asclepius, or Hercules, or Dionysus, if you can provide evidence to overcome that prior low probability, then we can take you seriously. The problem is, in Christian apologetics, they have dug in deep and tried throwing everything along with the kitchen sink at the wall to provide evidence, and it's all just utterly unpersuasive. The probability in the end looks just the same as it did from the get-go.
I don't think they had kitchen sinks back then, did they? Maybe, but they have to agree. Even they have to agree that the probability has to be low. It has to be an amazing, otherwise it wouldn't be a miracle. If people were raising from the dead every day here in Madison, Wisconsin cemeteries, we go, okay, resurrection. The fact that it is outrageous, the fact that it is so unlikely is what makes it a miracle, which is what makes it special to them. So they have to agree with us. Yeah, this story is so unlikely that, and I think you would agree that outrageous claims require outrageous proof. Not necessarily outrageous in a metaphysical sense, but outrageous in a numerical sense. We're going to need a lot more proof than just some stories, because basically at its core, the resurrection is a story. That's all it is. It's a story. And so for that story to be raised to some level of confidence, we're going to need more than just a few people. Like I was just in Salt Lake City with the Mormons, and they say that there were 11 actual witnesses to the golden tablets, their names and their addresses. They know who those witnesses are. And even with those actual named witnesses that they could identify, we are still skeptical that they saw anything like the golden tablets. So what we skeptics would say is, bring it on. Let's see what you got. We're not closed-minded.
Yeah, I think it warrants skepticism, especially even the internal structure of the narrative gives you that. I think every Christian, if they're going to follow their tradition to the T, are not do justice at the end of the day by becoming doubters. Because I know that there's the breaking of the fourth wall in John, where he's like, blessed are those who don't see, Mr. Reader, and yet still believes. But when you read the tradition through the Gospels as it develops, you find doubter after doubter. They don't believe who he is, right? You can identify with these characters, and even on the mountain in Matthew 28, some standing there doubted at this appearance of Christ, whatever that means, whether you say visionary, no, he physically rose from the dead, he's on the mountain, then why are some doubting right there in his presence? And yet Thomas, he appears to. And I did a video years back. It did really well. It had a lot of views. A lot of people were into it. And it was simply, what would it take for me to become a Christian, to believe Jesus really rose from the dead? And I said, it would take something like Thomas' situation. I would need tangible, you'd have to come and appear and show up and like give me some proofs, the same way you were willing to do for the doubters then. And yet we get nothing. And so when we think it's more probable this is a story, as you just said, Dane, or a narrative and not eyewitness reportage of an actual event that really happened, we're in the dark in terms of that, unless he does something to overcome that kind of skeptical thought. And I don't think we're doing anything wrong in doing so.
Well, he speaks to our heart, though. When you read it, and he speaks, and then you can know that it's true because the Spirit tells you, right?
Yeah. Yep.
In my book, godless, I have a chapter, Did Jesus Rise from the Dead? And the two critical analyses I take, the first one is internal, the contradictions in the stories. And way back in the early 90s, I wrote an article called Leave No Stone Unturned, in which I challenged believers not to prove that it happened, but just to tell the story in a coherent manner. Just tell it, what happened first, what's second, what's third, what's fourth, who said what, who did that, taking all 5 accounts, because you also have Acts, you also have Corinthians, taking all those accounts and without omitting a single detail, just write a narrative. What happened? No one's been able to do that. There's so many contradictions in the narrative that something has to give. Some of them, one or more of those authors is wrong. Doesn't prove they're all wrong, but at least somebody's off here. And the only attempts I've received from people who try to do that involve things like teleportation and time travel, and you know what I mean, to make the story fit. So that's the first arm of just to tell the story, right? The second thing is to point out that, and I'm sure both of you know this, that if you put the resurrection stories in order of when they were written in the first century, right? You have Paul's first, and then you have Mark, and then Matthew, probably just before Luke, and then later you have John. Put them in order across that time, starting, Paul's would have been around the year, what, 55 or so, somewhere in there. Mark maybe around the year 70 and so on. And what you will notice in each of those accounts, the earliest ones are simple. And as they grow, you'll see this curve of extraordinary events in each story going across that century until you get to John, where you have this huge, huge amount of extraordinary events. And that shows you the footprint of legend making. As time passes, as the story grows, as it expands, you will see this footprint. That doesn't prove it didn't happen, but it does show that something's happening in the telling of the story, which makes it look very much like a legend. Maybe there was some truth to the original kernel of the story, but the basic ending of it is legendary. And the example I give is stories like Paul Bunyan. There might have been an actual Paul Bunyan in history. We don't know. The story was written about 40 years later, which is kind of like Jesus. And the stories of Paul Bunyan, there might have been a North Woodsman with an axe who was fighting the British. I mean, that could have happened. Mm-hmm. But later, the story grew until he's got this magical giant ox digging. We all know that that's an exaggeration. That doesn't mean there wasn't an actual Paul Bunyan. There might have been. We don't know. He's lost to history. So I think we can say that about Yeshua. There may have been a Yeshua the Christ, like there were many other self-proclaimed messiahs. That doesn't mean, though, that cartoon character at the end of the story is actually factual.
Derek, do you want to comment on that?
I want to second everything that Dan just said. I'm so much in agreement with him that it's annoying. He's just taking the words right out of my mouth. I've got nothing left to say. He just evacuated.
I have something interesting if you don't have something to say, but I don't want to cut you off.
I'm so important that I've got to get running because I'm so massively important. But this has been wonderful. Thank you for having me, Dan. Great to meet you and share screen time with you. You're an idol of mine. So thank you all. Got to run.
Okay, Derek, love you. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, I like you somewhat.
All right, bro. Later. So I told them and I told everybody that I invited here, Dan, to join and leave whenever you need to leave. I don't know what's going on with my audio, so forgive me in advance. I just hoping I'm not getting too much feedback through the microphone because something's been up. I probably need to refresh my computer. I've been doing all sorts of editing. But with what you just said, I just spoke to a scholar. Actually, I love interviewing academics within New Testament scholarship, right? This guy, James W. Barker, got a great last name. Such an awesome last name. I'm going to be interviewing him soon, and he did one called John's Use of Matthew. But we're going to be talking about, I'm going to do several interviews. One of them he wrote also is on the book on Tatian. And it's really interesting to see how the early Christian Tatian did something not like what you are talking about exactly, of like every detail, trying to like give you all 4 gospels, including their differences and stuff. He harmonizes to write one gospel called the Diatessaron. What he does with it, though, is fascinating, because with those differences you find with Mark, Matthew, Luke, which synoptics seen together, and then you have John, which I've got scholars right now who are saying they call John the fourth synoptic gospel. Have you paid attention to some of that that's lately been coming out?
I've never heard him called a synoptic.
Yeah, so bear with me 1 second here. Let me see. I had it somewhere in here. Mark Goodacre has a book he just wrote called John the fourth synoptic gospel. He thinks John knows all three of the synoptics. When he's writing, he knows them, and he's kind of continuing some of the stuff that the earlier synoptics actually have in them. Well, this Christian author Tatian, in his rewrite of the Gospels, trying to harmonize them into one book, he has to do some clever things because there's some problems. The synoptics, in the last week of Jesus' life, gets himself killed. Likely, most scholars think if there was a historical Jesus there that did cleanse the temple, that sealed his fate. They said, no, you're not going to come in here flipping over tables, lashing at people in the temple, violence potentially ensuing with a large crowd protecting him. Like, this looks like a potential rebel. And so he gets killed. But in John, it's at the beginning of the ministry, of course, 3 years ago. What Tatian does is he doesn't go with the end of Jesus' life, like the synoptics, or the beginning of his ministry, which is 3 years earlier. Tatian does neither and puts it in the middle. So when he rewrites the gospel, he creates a whole new gospel trying to fit them together. Whereas like modern, really conservative apologists online today will just say Jesus cleansed the temple twice. That's how they deal with this problem. They'll say, well, he cleansed it at the beginning of his ministry. Oh, and at the end of his ministry. And it's like, you just can't deal with contradictions. They can't handle the problem. You know what I mean? They have to make it twice.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fair to say that the resurrection stories are really wildly contradictory, but before the resurrection, there's not that much contradiction. There are some problems. You see, pretty much, you can kind of harmonize things up to the crucifixion. And if you were just looking at that alone, you would say, well, the story is kind of coherent, isn't it? But it's after that Easter morning, what happens then, where the thing just really blows up. So there might be some historical kernels in any or maybe all of those gospels. They were writing about something, right? They were actually writing about a person. And I think the last I heard from Bart Ehrman was that the crucifixion story pretty much seals the historical position that there was a Jesus. But after that, it just goes crazy.
Yeah, I get all sorts of different scholars who have different takes, and I have questions, Dan. I'm like not sure. I'm not too confident in knowing for sure what the case is historically. I know that Bart has a much more confident tone when he describes these things, and I'm talking to other scholars who don't. They're PhDs. They spent decades in research. They walked away and they highlight different aspects of the whole thing. And I think Bart's a good measuring stick where a lot of people, both conservative Christians and those who are more on the atheist skeptic side, will use him for their goals, for their means or whatever. But then there's some who go beyond Bart on some things. And they say, hey, how do we know he even died the week of Passover? The narrative says he dies that week, but it is pretty interesting that on one of the Gospels, he dies the day of Passover and the other is the day before. And it's like, well, which is it? It can't be both. Or unless you say he got crucified the day before, they took him down, then they crucified him again on the next day, and they took him down and they put him in a tomb. Like, which is it? And
like a twice baked potato, right?
Yeah, twice baked potato. And I kind of wonder, personally, he could have been crucified in February. He could have been crucified in May, April, October, and someone writing the story about the guy who got himself killed, could anchor him there. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the answer. I'm just saying that high holy week that Jews celebrate, and that he is seen as a Passover lamb, as a sacrifice for atonement, which we find in Pauline theology, that very week of March the 25th is the same week in the 50s AD when Claudius the emperor implemented the Hilaria festival. Have you ever heard about the Hilaria festival?
No.
So the god Attis, who castrated himself before a pine tree, that's their central myth. So when we talk about arguments from embarrassment, no one would ever craft a Jew being crucified on a cross. That's embarrassing. It must be historical. Why would they have a central god man named Attis? And in their myth, he cuts off his testicles, bleeds out to death in front of a pine tree, and then they put an effigy of him on the pine tree. They carry him in procession into the city. They wail and cut themselves and gnash and scream and cry for 3 days, wailing about his death. On the third day, March 25th, he rises from the dead, or he's seen as resurrected. I'm not making this up. This isn't zeitgeist. This isn't like, oh, you atheists just want to do some type of trick to try and act like the sources comply with you. There are actual Attis academics that have researched this, that Claudius implemented this actual festival, a 3-day motif, on the very week that Passover happens, with Jesus dying for 3 days. I have to ask myself, should we be so certain that this real dude died at this real time, at this real way? Like, I just have to question and go, are these Gentile Christians maybe being influenced as they're crafting a narrative, and leave that open and not be too confident? Does that make sense?
So what I'm saying, and I think you're right, is that the story of the crucifixion, I think, is unlikely, but it's less unlikely than the resurrection stories. So you know what I'm saying? If you're looking at a scale of what's like, it really goes to crap after Easter morning, as far as the internal coherence of the story goes, right?
Right.
Not its connection to history necessarily, but the story itself. So,
right.
And of course, in my mind, all of it is way less than 0.5. I mean, all of it's way, way down. So if you're going to have to round things off, we're going to have to say no.
Yeah, of course. It's unlikely. And I just think if you're going to think it is likely, I think you should take serious the other claims of other gods. Yeah. Because the earliest apologist, Justin Martyr, when he's writing about Jesus, and he literally says in the Greek, we believe nothing different about Jesus than you do the sons of God, Zeus, Asclepius, the Caesars, and he gives this long list of demigods, but then adds a caveat and says, the devil or demons long ago made him look like this. And his whole argument to the emperor when he's writing this is simply saying, look, we believe nothing different than you guys do about your guys. The problem is our guy was morally superior, because the sensitivity for the philosophers at this time was who behaves better, who acted moral. And this is all thanks to Plato and the philosophers. Christians have adopted this idea. So if Zeus was seen as coming down and forcing himself upon a woman, or Heracles was a womanizer and a drunk, or Dionysus was a drunk and they had orgies, all of that counted in the mind of Christians like Justin Martyr as immoral behavior, therefore not godly. Therefore, our God and what we believe about him is superior and true. It wasn't about the belief that there were gods that died and rose or ascended to heaven or were seen to have powers. That's not what he's saying. He's not making a historical claim that ours happened but yours didn't, kind of thing that modern apologists do. He's just saying ours was more moral. We had a better teacher who was a good guy, and your guys were doing nasty, naughty things. Yeah. That was like their thing at the time.
Of course, we could challenge Justin Martyr. Some of the teachings of Jesus were not necessarily that moral.
Exactly.
But one argument in his favor is that if you believe the story, the Magnificat of Mary, technically God did ask her permission. Although, how do you say no to God? I mean, really, she basically said, "Do with me as you will." So that was a consensual sex between a woman and a god, I suppose. But so is that more moral? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even think she got the option within the canon. I think God just chose her and did he overshadows Mary. And that's another topic I talked to a scholar, M. David Litwell, about. And he was explaining how the age-old God sleeps with a mortal woman and has a demigod birth.
Yeah.
They even whitewash that into the narratives about Jesus. It may be undertone kind of implied, but even in like the birth narrative of Augustus in Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars, he describes that a serpent slithered up to his mother and then disappears. It doesn't say anything more. It doesn't give you the story. It doesn't elaborate. And then it says 9 months later, Augustus was born. The serpent representing Apollo, his father, which is a god. And so like they're starting to get to a place where I think they tone down the sexual tones of these kind of births. The only other place I find it explicitly implied in the Hebrew Bible is Samson. There's a if you haven't read it, there's an article called A Strange Biography of Samson. And the modern scholar points out the language in the Hebrew Bible looks like some redactor was like fudging it. And the angel of the Lord meets Samson's mom. And wouldn't you find it kind of ironic that his mother never gets named, Dan? Ever. Like the father gets named, but the mom never gets named. In such a patriarchal book, I would expect such a thing. But the mom's never named. And he comes to speak to her and tells her some stuff. She goes back to her husband and says, hey, look, this visitor came and said, you know, I'm going to have a child and all this stuff and whatever. He gets jealous. Josephus writes about this in his commentaries about the Hebrew Bible and says, the husband says, well, next time he comes, come get me. I have some words for him. He goes back after he visits her again in a field, brings the husband back, and the husband goes, hey, what'd you tell my wife? He says, none of your business. And he's like, well, hold on. Who are you? That's none of your business too. You're about to have a child. The child's going to be a Nazarite. Don't let him drink wine. Don't cut his hair. And then Samson and Yair Zokovich is the name, Yair Zokovich, I believe it is. And he points out that someone redacted out that God, the angel of the Lord, had sex with Samson's mother.
Well, and also told her that your son's going to be the deliverer. He's going to be the that kind of looks like Hercules, doesn't it? What happened?
I think so. I think Samson and Hercules are so like even the strong man that kills the lion.
Yeah. And all of that was for this stupid bet that he was supposed to lose at this wedding. I mean, what a dumb story. I mean, it looks like something out of this dark action comic novel or and God wanted him to lose that bet. He comes up with this riddle to bet the family of his bride, this Philistine woman, and the only reason God wanted Samson to lose that bet was so that he could get angry. Mm-hmm. He loses the bet because his wife betrayed him, right? He gets angry, and then the Spirit of the Lord came on him. When they got really angry, that's the Spirit of God. And then he went over to, was it Ashkelon? He went to another town and he killed a bunch of Philistines and he brought back and he paid off his debt, right?
Right.
So that whole stupid story of the marriage, this fake marriage, and in fact, he gave his wife to his best friend after that, right? So what does that say about the sanctity of marriage, really? I mean, in the Bible, it was all a ruse. And even at the beginning of the story, it says this was a pretext. This whole thing happened as a pretext so that, a dozen Philistines could get killed? That was that whole thing so that God could, why didn't he just give them all heart attacks or something? Or why this stupid,
Yeah, the way it paints it, it's almost like he wanted the sins to happen. Like there's this idea of like, there's this moral bank that's being filled up, kind of like the Canaanites, right? Hey, I'm going to send you to Egypt. You're going to be slaves. You're not getting the land yet. The Canaanites got to keep doing terrible things and cooking their kids in ovens and stuff. Once they're done doing that, then I'll send you in to go kill and slaughter those evil people, but they haven't filled up their sin yet. And then in Judges, it's like the same idea that look, there's like failed project after failed project of Judges. Finally, they ask for a king. And that seems to be also a horrific idea, but yet then he utilizes that to bring the Messiah about. And so it's like, what kind of, who the engineer for this whole scheme seems to not know what he's doing. It seems pretty obvious to me when you read it that way. The whole thing's kind of funky.
Well, it's like it was put together by committee over centuries, kind of,
Right.
it's a big Rube Goldberg kind of whatever. But well, I gotta go. I have to. I'm sorry I'm not so up on my notes on the resurrection because I haven't done one of those for like 4 or 5 years. There is a video online, me debating Mike Licona on the resurrection back in, I think it was 2002. And ironically or interestingly, one of the young students who was at that university audience, Patrick Elliott, he was Catholic, but he left that. He started thinking and he started taking some classes, and then he left his faith. He is now working for us. He's now legal director of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And we have a video of the day that he came to watch me do that debate. That debate was pretty substantive, and Mike Licona was pretty up on all of that. So if you can find that, Dan Barker, Mike Licona, that was like 20 years ago or more, but still it was, I thought it was pretty interesting. And well, Patrick did, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly convinced him. If before you go, is there any like your top 3 you think best performances that you recommend people go watch debate wise?
Oh,
if you can recall ones that really stood out. I mean, it was like you just felt like that was your best performance.
Well, my what was it? 2000. When did Obama run? 2012, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, that was November, the same month of the election in Oxford University. So it was me, Michael Shermer, and Peter Milliken as a team debate. And a lot of people have watched that and said it because it was short enough to be summarized and succinct, right? The opening statement. And, you know, I've never challenged anyone to debate. We don't set up debates, but we keep getting invited. And so I don't always know if or remember if they were recorded or not. And years later, someone will say, I saw that debate you did in California. I said, what debate? But so I guess just poke around. The Oxford one I think was nice. But on the resurrection, that Licona debate was, I think, pretty good. It's like 2 hours long, though. So
yeah. Do you remember what like? Because I'm gonna have to go watch that. I'll probably do a reaction to it. I have a reaction channel as well, and I've reacted to some of your content already. I love what you do and the way you approach it. It's so down to earth. But do you recall in your memory like any really important points that you had with him in that debate? Or was it just too long ago?
That was long ago. I have my notes here somewhere. But it got into the technicals of what do scholars say and what did Gerd Ludemann say and what does, and also not just the historical stuff, but the philosophical stuff too. Why should we even go there in the first place philosophically? So, and yeah, I guess I don't remember it in great detail, but
well,
let me know because I haven't seen it for a while. But
yeah, I'll do a reaction to it for my channel. Again, shameless plug for you, ffrf.org, ladies and gentlemen. I'll put it in the chat right now. Look, this was a last minute live, and I wanted to have you on. I had other people I invited. Timing was just last minute. I do plan on scheduling these more often, and I'd like to have you on, Dan. When your time permits, I'll give you it was last minute. So anyone who's wondering like, hey, they didn't go on and on with Dan. He said he had 30 minutes to spare. So in the future, plan something and really dig into some of the material together, if that's cool.
So is it about anything, or is it specifically about mythicism or
what the channel?
Yeah, your show.
Oh, I cover so much.
Okay.
Bible, I mean, Hebrew Bible, New Testament is often what we do because, I'm approaching this from an academic point of view, but also I'm bringing in my critical, skeptical, doubter, perspective. We interview academics, but I also talk to a Assyriologist. I've got some stuff coming up with classicists. I'm going to be talking science. I like to talk about evolution with people who are, experts in the field. And I'm going to expand that even further to other areas of exploration, anthropology. I really think all of these fields, philosophy should be touched.
So philosophy, like the fine tuning argument and the moral argument, those things.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
Okay.
But from people, look, you could join too. I mean, I'm not a philosopher at all, right? Like in the sense of anything of an expert. We all do it, but there's a lot of stuff out there that I think is just, I feel like a lot of apologists hide in philosophy when they're making their arguments. They like to go there because they can do a lot of stuff with that. Whereas I like to just go, but your text says, I mean, the history says that the book, well, then they find ways to make it not mean what it seems to be saying explicitly. And so I've got to get my philosophy sharpened. And I've had expert PhDs in the past where atheist philosophers come on. I wouldn't care if they're theist philosophers as long as they're not apologists. And they brought, their teaching, you know what I mean? So people understand.
Well, so let me tell you real quick. There's a book coming out published by Erdman's publisher. That's EERD. It's a Christian publisher, Erdman's.
Right.
It's called Debating God's Existence, Believers and Skeptics in Friendly Conversations, coming out this summer. And it's all based on a debate I did with Andrew Lloyd Johnson in Florida. They have transcribed the entire debate, opening, closing, rebuttals, and questions. Then they have enlisted 7 Christian theist scholars and 7 atheist scholars to Ben Watkins and Malpas, and so they're commenting on our debate on the various issues, and it's a friendly fight going on here. We talked about, of course, fine tuning. We talked about the kalam, moral argument, and then immaterial minds, the hiddenness argument, Schellenberg's argument. So all of that's in there, and it's a pretty substantial book. They're just finishing the index. And this is a Christian book that I'm going to be recommending because both sides are in it. So maybe when that comes out, we can have a talk about it,
Yes,
and
sir.
I have to give Erdman's a lot of credit, and they're kind of nervous. They're a Christian publisher. They got Paul Copan, Paul Copan. They got him to write the foreword to the book. And he and I and the other debaters, we were at the Society for Biblical Literature in Boston last November talking about the book. And so Paul Copan's name is on the front, Debating God's Existence, forward, but my name's not on the front. They're not going to sell books with my name on the front. But I'm pretty excited because this is a chance for me to write directly to a Christian readership. You know what I mean?
Right.
Most of the people who buy my books are free thinkers, skeptics, and the Christians aren't buying my other books. They're gonna, So anyway, let's be in touch about that, and we'll come back and talk about it once it's out.
Yeah, I'd love that. I love that. Again, I really appreciate your time, and I think there's much we can talk about. Of course, that I'd like to promote the book, get people familiar with the debate, and then we can also touch on different topics. I mean, you've debated so much; you have a lot of experience in this arena of engaging Christianity. As a devout fundamentalist that we both were when I read your book, I can't remember the title of it, but it went through your entire story quite in depth and how serious and committed you were to eventually not believing anymore. And that was really shocking,
Well, I know I thought I was all alone, but if you know about the Clergy Project, there are now almost 1,400 former clergy, and some are still active. There are clergy in the pulpit right now who are atheists or agnostics, and they're stuck, and they're trying to find a way out. But there's about 1,400 of them. So our story is not the only one. These are professional ordained clergy, rabbis, priests, ministers, a couple of monks, an imam, who have left. They have abandoned their faith in the supernatural.
Powerful.
But
Dan, thank you.
I have to abandon you now. Sorry.
No, absolutely not. I understand. If you need to go, thank you so much for your time. Have a good day.
All right. Bye, Derek.
Bye, Dan. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Barker. That was a fantastic discussion. Last minute. What did you guys think of that? Tell me that wasn't fun. Dan's been debating for decades, and he's got a lot of debate experience with a lot of people. There's so much material to cover, which is one of the reasons I'm motivated to learn more about the history books, to learn more about what the texts in front of us say. I think that's important. I think it's important people take serious that, because I feel like a lot of Christians like to fly into philosophy, and I get that. I mean, there's a long tradition of that within Christianity, and we should all be brushed up on that. I've got a lot of learning to do. But then there's a lot of atheists, I think, that don't, at least online public atheists, that don't really get down into the weeds of the scholarship, the latest, greatest critical scholarship that is out. And I really believe it would just up their skill in terms of criticism and knowledge of what the texts are doing. It'd be cool to see more of them learn the languages. That way, when they're engaging or debating or trying to challenge the views of those on the other side, they know what they're talking about. They're not just having to engage on philosophical grounds, but even on textual critical grounds, on material we have. Like, that's an important approach, I think. I personally enjoy that much more. But eventually, I hope to actually dive into some philosophy myself, get my head wrapped around a lot of that. Let me catch up with you, because I haven't paid attention to the chat, and we've been live just hanging out. And I haven't been live a lot for months, it seems. And then I was live the other day, and this is the second live in not too long. I'm going to try and put this on a schedule and start coming in here and doing this more often. So someone says, I don't trust eyewitnesses very much. I don't blame you. Look, you can't trust your own eyes, it seems, these days. You watch a video literally of someone killing someone, and two narratives spin from a video we all can see. And it's like, even with you seeing the video, you can't just trust, your eyes. There's context. There's this, that. Every side wants to make the case, right? So, bro, trust me, bro. No, I'm good on it. Let me see. Not that hard. A dead Messiah requires theological repair. Resurrection does the work. Prior known examples are the blueprint. That was in relation to our chat earlier. Someone says, my official position is Jesus did rise from the dead, but that it stems from fables and that a real Jesus never existed to have risen from the dead. So within a story, he rose from the dead. I'm not sure I completely get where you're coming from. Scrolling down here. True, that's what Origen said. Allegory hidden behind contradictions and esoteric symbolism. Or that was just the thing Christians were doing at the time, which was allegorizing a lot of this material. And he saw problems with the New Testament and said, let's not take this thing too serious. Let's not like take a magnifying glass to this text as if it's telling us what literally happened. Go from there. Josie says, laughing my eyes off the thumbnail. Jesus is saying something like, what did I make the thumbnail say? I had, let's see. Watch it, Derek. Jesus popping out. Watch it, Derek. Yeah, it was good to see Derek Bennett, and thankfully he gave me some of his time. I always love that guy, and I would like to see him more active online to do more of the YouTube stuff. He's taking care of himself, though, these days, and he has a lot of insight on comparative myth stuff, resurrection motifs, different gods that die and rise, different heroes, different historical figures that are said to have died and risen from the dead. So it's not too shocking. I think that a lot of modern apologists assume there really weren't any ancient historical claims for people dying and rising and becoming deified, or they just aren't aware of it. Whereas Justin Martyr breathed that oxygen. He saw that. So his excuse for why Jesus and not the other gods was simply on ethical grounds, philosophically ethical grounds. They were moving in a direction of asceticism much more. And Christianity was fighting that too, even internally, to where we get like 2 Timothy texts talk about a woman isn't saved unless she's childbearing. Like, they're overreacting and the pendulum swinging back against asceticism and saying, you need to be a good, godly woman, but you better produce children if you want to be saved. So there's like a way of stopping it from going too far. You also have apocalypticism in mind too, so that's worth it. Or the stories where the Greeks and Romans warning Jews to stop effing around and they will be accepted and left alone. Not so sure. I don't know if this is the Roman provenance view you're bringing in or not. Man, Bear Pig, birth narratives have major contradictions, no doubt. no doubt. Contradictions are the essence of the gospel. They actually explain Jesus from the cloud. He believes precede the story. The story stabilizes the belief. Scrolling down here. I'm just trying to make sure I missed a lot of your talk while I was actually talking with Dan and Derek. So I want to make sure. The Greeks practiced both hearth and serpent worship, which is why those ideas were being demonized in the same way that we would consider sacrifice barbaric. Little known fact, Justin Martyr lived in Rome when the practice of bishops first began. Churches originally consisted of elders and deacons. Okay, you got it, Derek. Scholars read Samson as ironic theology. God can save through chaos when covenant fidelity goes to shit. Yeah, why not? The mythological designation for the Iberian Peninsula that endured the longest was Hesperia. The name Hesperia comes from the Garden of the Hesperides, also known as Eden. I don't, I'd like to see your ancient sources for that personally, just because I think the narrative of Eden in the Bible is they're likely placing that geography near their Holy Land. I imagine this is, modern Palestine, Israel region, Jordan, etc. Unless you really want to keep the continuity from the earlier Near Eastern mythology, which would have been near the Euphrates. And so I tend to not overly care, but I wouldn't go beyond the region there in the Near East, Southeast Asia. That's just my thoughts, though. Yeah, happy to see Dan Barker. Yeah, Dan just randomly, I wrote him, hey, man, I'm going live. Would you be interested in joining me? He says, when? I said, in 30 minutes. And he's like, I can spare 30 minutes. I'll join you. Dan is a cool Native American Myth Vision podcast. Dan's cool, period. Doc Pluromana. Let's see. Most have no clue how Christianity developed. It's like an amalgamation of random elements from different times. Listen to people describe the history of Christianity. Michael Sandel is a great first-year course on YouTube. It has a great resource. Awesome. Not to brag, but I played a very important part of of Sheep in the Field in our 5th grade Christian school's production of Dan's Mary Had a Little Lamb. Interesting. That's worth bragging about. That is a heavy brag. Absolutely. Let's see. Names are just names. Yeah. Thanks, Dan Barker. Dan doesn't remember being on with Derek, but he has. Maybe I'm wearing because I'm wearing the suit top, he may forget, but I've interviewed him more than once, I think, already. I think we've already had 2 interviews in the past with Dan. Exit music. Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot. I'm just seeing what everybody here is saying. God should have a daughter. Derek and Miller together would be a good show. Absolutely. Miller, I planned on doing something with him soon, too. Another one. He's been writing an article. I believe he said something about 1 Corinthians 14 into 15 and how obviously the chapter breaks weren't there. And when you read the continuity of thought between 14 into 15, it gets even more scandalous, if I might say. There may be true events in the Gospels, the Odyssey, the Iliad, etc. How do we know what those are? It's all just a guess. It makes them not very helpful for history. That's why I always like to refer to Lucian's work, How to Write History, just because if you really wanted people to know what happened and you cared about those kind of details, Lucian says you do not sprinkle in legend with it. You don't add the fictive in with this is what history is actually saying. Now, Christians today will just go, no, it all is history. The story happened as it's written. Lucian would have looked at this and probably wrote a scathing, this is what this guy's saying, this is history, which that's not what any of the Gospels claim to be. But Lucian tells you, he writes in his How to Write History, if you write history and you're putting legend and fiction and fable and tells inside of your history, mixing them in there as it was obviously something that people were doing, you have committed an unforgivable sin. He literally makes it seem that it's an unforgivable sin because every generation after this, he says plainly, will not know what actually happened. And I think the Gospels are perfect examples of that very issue. And that is why there's debate in the field of like what sayings Jesus said. Did he say this or did he not? And, you know, even in the Jesus seminar, they would color code what saying likely went back, or maybe they don't know, or they're more confident on, or they don't think he said at all. And they would have like different color coding systems for each scholar that was a whole collection, a consensus of brilliant critical thinkers who are saying, no, I think he said this and here's why. Or I don't think he said this, or I lean that I don't know. We're sitting here pulling our hair out of our heads because Lucian's point. They're mixing crap in there. And then some go a little further. And I empathize with these people who say, but how do you even know those things are history? Like, how do you know they're mixing in any history here? You can't know that. You could say, well, okay, they mentioned people. They mentioned geography. They mentioned, you know, practices that people practiced at the time. But even in well-known fiction like Euripides and various different plays, for example, or fictions, they give real verisimilitude, big word, but simply means give real aspects of history, people, places in fictions. So it's really a nightmare, I think, in terms of getting to the bottom of it. Oh, snap. I got a super duper from my boy, Deconstruction Zone in the house. Justin in the house, ladies and gentlemen. The God of gods named Doug must be present. Good to see you here, man. And I look forward to doing some streams with you in the future and start diving in together. Jesus was clearly hung. Bro literally needed help to carry his wood. If Christ wasn't around, oh God, dude. The way that you're writing this, bro, the way that you're writing this, my perverted mind is kicking in. I can't help with the words you're describing here. And I don't know if you mean to do this, but look, hung, wood, erected. Okay. Now that must be the pervert in me coming out. Okay. Jesus was clearly hung. Bro literally needed help to carry his wood. If Christ wasn't erected, we are most pitied among men. 1 Corinthians 15 director's cut. Holy moly, man. Dude, that's good. That's good. Bless Doug. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. No, seriously, Justin, that's hilarious, bro. That is... I didn't know if you were serious till I got to that third part where you're like, if Christ wasn't erected, I'm like, bro, what are you doing, man? What are you doing, Justin? Don't BS me, man. I know for a fact you're doing something here. This, I swear I'm like taking it serious. Jesus was clearly hung. And in my mind, I'm like, There's like, bro literally needed help to carry his wood. And then it started to get more like, Then it was like, if Christ wasn't erected, I'm like, now I see it. Okay. Third time's a charm. I get it, bro. I get it. Good to see you, man. I hope your flight is safe. I hope you're doing well, man. And I know it's crazy chaotic here. We don't know how to handle snow in the USA. There's like thousands of flights being delayed because of the ice storms and stuff. Oh, no doubt. No doubt, bro. Absolutely rock hard for Doug. As you know it. I'm a polytheist, though. See, this is something Justin's trying to change my mind on because there's many different, deities that I flirt with. And I'm kind of like a God-fearer at the synagogue of Doug. Okay. I hear you, bro. Like I'm there. I'm rock hard for Doug, but sometimes these other gods are tickling my ear, and carrying my wood for me, if you will, So it's a struggle. It's a struggle. I also am not interested in chopping off my foreskin. So, we'll see. We'll see. No, good to see you, man. Great, funny super chat. You got me. All right. Where did I leave off here now? You got me all distracted there, Justin. Eden equals Lebanon. Let's see. Eden is the palace grounds of a monarch. Adam, Eve were eunuch slaves who worked the palace grounds around a monarch. John Allegro was not wrong. He was not popular, and he still isn't, but he was not wrong. Jesus is a mushroom, actually a hash shroom edible, the mushroom bread of life. Heaven is where the God monarch presently is at. And now we're getting to, I think, the super chats. Amen, Doug. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Let there be jokes. Set up. Yeah, you really did set me up, though. If you're still watching, bro, and I know you're in the airport or whatever, you did set me up there, bro. You did. You really got me. You really got me. Derek. So was it Derek Peter? Wake up. I'm late. Start over. Deborah. We weren't going long today. Don't worry. If you felt like watching us back, our 5-minute live stream, you could play it probably at 1.5, 2 times speed. Dan Barker was here. Derek Bennett was here for a moment. I was having the dumbest complications with my audio. I don't know what was going on there. I don't know what was going on there, but we made it work. We made it work. All right. Any questions from you all before I dip out? I'm going to go edit. I've got 7 more interviews I did with John F. White yesterday. Then I did an interview last night with Professor Ian Young, who is a linguist, a Hebrew Bible scholar, linguist. We go deep into the weeds on this idea about dating biblical texts, but also how fluid the Bible was, even in the BCE era for the Hebrew Bible. There's such fluidity even in the Qumran collection. Before the Qumran collection, what changes? What do we not have? And minimalists might say we had nothing at some point around, the 4th, 3rd century BCE. Some minimalists might say there was nothing, or they might say there were minor things maybe that floated back into the Persian, into the Babylonian period, maybe even earlier. But what did that look like? The Bible was changing in front of our very eyes within the material we have in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we talk about that. And all of that will be early on the Patreon and the members and all of that. So if you haven't already, we could definitely use that. What? Derek, I'm currently destroying Jim Bob, I think you mean yet once again. Look, I've left those guys alone for the longest. The whole reason I even did the recent video, first of all, is because there's still this, you can't drop a video about any subject matter without one of the goons in their audience popping up and oh, you got cooked by Jay Dyer. And it's that was 2 years ago, and they're endlessly still talking about this situation on Jim Bob's live stream. And I thought to myself, maybe I should do a video just telling honestly what I thought about it and how I felt about it and what really happened. And of course, tribalism is going to set in. So people who are on my side are going to support me and believe what I'm saying, and his side's just going to go excuses, bullshit, blah, 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 But I admit as much that I don't have all the tag bullshit down. I'm not familiar as much with the precept nonsense, and hopefully I can get more acquainted over the next year. And then maybe, I can actually tackle those kinds of things when I do encounter them. But I just find it kind of nonsense. For the sake of argument, I'll just grant the theistic position. Let's just turn this around. Stop playing the games about proving or not proving or believing there's a God or not a God. If they need a God to exist for logic and rationality and all that stuff in the world to make sense, I'll grant it to them. Let's have the God. Now let's say how this proves Christianity. Let's prove Christianity now. Evidence is on your end. The ball is in your end. Now prove Christianity. Prove your religion true. You know what I mean? And then once we get to that, we can actually hear a defense on their part for their own religion, which they don't tend to do typically. They like to do the tag stuff. They like to do the whole, if you don't, support the idea of a deity, then what? And I kind of wondered, I've not watched a lot of this material. I was invited on that live stream by Neil from Gnostic Informant years ago. And I wonder how that tag argument, those kind of arguments work on other theists. Do they even use those arguments on Muslims? Do they use those arguments on other people who are probably doing their own little precept tag stuff for their own faith? I don't know. I just never really paid attention to their engagements with other people, or do they only use this stuff on atheists, people who say they don't believe in a God or aren't sure if a God exists? I don't know. Help me out. Help me out. It's funny you said that. Gary Habermas had a scholar say you should interview him and just politely ask questions, from a critical scholarly point of view, and hear his answers without, trying to do like I do when I interview scholars, but ask critical questions and see what his answers are. And then there's content for people to react to. You know what I'm saying? Read this chat linked and be prepared to laugh your butt off. Chat linked. I got you, bro, you said? Let's see. Okay, I'm scrolling down. Take your church back and build the temple of the Lord. Oh, they don't, because tag is a universal argument to establish the existence of God, not the type of God or specific God. Got it. Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, are you on you're on Discord, right? I'd be curious to know if you're on Discord. Be interesting to chat sometime on because I have a Myth Vision Discord. I haven't been that active on, but I'd like to be able to once in a while just have a voice room where we can chat and be able to kind of bounce ideas off each other and hear each other out, because I kind of figured that, and I don't know whether or not there's something out there, but I don't start with supposing that it does. And I think it's harder, in my opinion, the work, and I've talked to Alex Malpass about this. That's why I did the follow-up episode about the whole tag thing that happened with me and Jay, from a real philosopher. And he's like, there are many ways that people try to answer, and most of the philosophers who are honest will go, we're not sure. So a lot of the more critical PhD scholars they're not overly dogmatic or confident and certain in a lot of ways that a lot of these online apologists are about these arguments. But when you try to explain rationality, how does the world even make sense? That's a lot of material you would have to, in an honest discussion, not a gotcha kind of script ran discussion, but in an honest discussion, trying to reason through why the world makes sense the way it does and all of that. Fascinates me. That kind of argument and idea, it does interest me to be able to understand that from an evolutionary aspect, from a science, empirically testable, verifiable kind of approach. I'm really curious to know how science and scientists from various backgrounds make sense of that as a collective, and not just, well, God is the logos and logos is reason and thought, and therefore because there's reason and thought in God, that's why we have reason and thought. And this kind of idea that typically has been the philosophical stance since Plato and most Christians have held to. I'm more interested in how do we make sense of that through a scientific lens without God, the best we can. And we get that in categories like we've seen. If you haven't been on my reaction channel, I react to William Lane Craig debating, I can't remember the philosopher, but he's an ethicist arguing about morality. Can you have morality that not grounded in God? And that debate was really interesting, hearing a actual skilled philosopher argue on just ethics alone without God. And now we need to ask ourselves, can reason be explained without God? Can all of these things be explained without God? And I imagine they can, but reasoning through that would take some time to unpack, and the various ideas I'd be curious to hear. Anyway, a lot of you are well versed in this stuff that I'm not. It has to be considerably unpacked, I imagine, because it's a lot harder than just saying, well, God, abracadabra, God. That's much easier, right? To just go, God, and then the answer is there, and then it's like, okay, what do you do with that? It's harder to then explain. Well, God created man clay, Adam. Oh, Eve, rib. There's woman and man. There you have it. Evolution is false, Bible true. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And it's much more complex if you go to explain evolution to someone, the gradual gradation of life, because there's no, we categorize them as species, but like there's a constant, slow, gradual transition between forms for hundreds of millions of years. Dude, that's a lot to unpack. And in a gotcha moment kind of thing is very difficult with a lot of people that you engage that are online. And crazy. Let me see. I'm awake. God or gods. That's the other thing too. Can it work with polytheism? They'll argue it can't, but why not? Why not? And a sociological aspect of rationality and reason. Exactly. Like this is stuff that interests me because once upon a time, I imagine many of you would just say, God did it. I have a book that tells me God did it. Or I have a church that tells me that uses a book that says God did it. And it's very easy to just do that and then just try to argue and defend that castle the whole time, especially when you're running a script and you're not defending the claims in that book or in that church. You don't have to do that. You're just arguing for this, like, I think there was a source to begin with. And I think that's like, for me, that's like very simple, easy position to try and hold to if I was a believer, to argue the tag argument if I wanted to, or some form of presuppositional apologetics. But I have more respect, I'll be honest, with evidentialists who try to at least claim they can prove with evidence, and they're trying to make arguments from evidence personally, than that kind of argumentation. Even though I think the evidentialists are wrong, if they really will look at evidence that drives their reasoning, if they're honest, at some point, I imagine they're going to hit a road and they're going to end up deconstructing, and their faith, if they remain faithful, will change. They will develop, they will mature, they will change their view, realizing, that bubble that I had of inerrancy isn't true. Or that bubble that I had that this was the case isn't true any longer. And they can walk that road further away. But I don't know. I just don't know what to think about some of those people who are dying on the hill of that kind of philosophical tag / precept argument. How do you get from there to grow up and realize, hey, hold on, maybe I'm wrong? You should also invite Dr. Craig Keener and discuss miracles. Now, isn't Dr. Craig Keener, let me look him up. Craig Keener. Didn't he do the book of Acts? Craig Keener. Okay, I see Craig Keener here. If he's the guy who wrote the Acts commentary that everyone's told me, you must read the book of Acts or you don't know about the book of Acts commentary. I remember opening his book. Okay, I see he does have a book of Acts, an exegetical commentary, and I don't know if this is the book that was like a massive book. Real quick here. I think this is him. Craig Keener. I'm looking to see. He does have Acts and Exegetical Volume 1. Let me see something here. I'm actually trying to check something here because in the opening of this book of Acts, I think he he shows his cards and says something like, we believe in the inerrancy and infallibility of scripture and stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, bro, I was like 4 pages into your book, and then you start talking about, well, remember now we're approaching scripture. It's infallible and inerrant. And I'm like, I'm putting your book right back down because I'm maybe if I wanted to like critique it or whatever, I just didn't have any interest. I'm looking to try and actually read commentaries that aren't trying to start with the conclusion and then work their way into making that conclusion make sense based on the data they run across for me. You know what I mean? I think I got the book here. See what page it's on if it's there. He wrote a book on miracles as well, you said? Wendy in the house. What is good, Wendy? Good to see you here. Yes, he did, you said. Okay. And I'm not trying to be just like, I'm really not trying to be rude about that. I just, when you start telling me that, like, remember, we're starting this is infallible, inerrant. The focus of this commentary, I'm scrolling through his book now for the first few pages where he's kind of explaining like why, like what the goals are and what they're doing within the evangelical circle as he's writing this material. What I find interesting is lots of Christians really like to lean heavily on Acts, Luke Acts specifically, because in the Gospel of Luke and Acts, that's where you find many, many names. Like you could do this with the Gospels, you could do this with Pontius Pilate, you could do it with like a few mentionings of people, Herod, but Luke Acts name drops several different historical characters and people, even the census and stuff of Quirinius, all of that. But that's stuff that is likely coming, a lot of it, from Josephus. And I've got a video coming on that. I'm grateful to Baker Academic for welcoming and fully supporting this manuscript when Hendrickson Publishers sold most of its academic titles. I am grateful to both of them for believing in this manuscript. I'm trying to find, I'm grateful. So he's just grateful here. Abbreviations. I'm trying to find the part where he says something about like inerrancy and infallibility, just to point out what turned me off to reading it at the time. Was just like, damn, I could see this guy being interviewed by like a Christian Apologist channel. Damn, there's a lot of names here. I had one guy say, don't even talk about the Book of Acts if you haven't read this guy's commentary. And I'm like, I haven't even read all of Richard Purvo's commentary, but I've read quite a bit of sections out of it. It's like huge commentary, 1,000, 1,500 page commentary. And I think Purvo's commentary would probably be far greater than someone that's coming probably from an evangelical standpoint. I'm still scrolling. I don't see it. Okay. And it might be in a different one because he has like 4 volumes or something. Most non-religious people in public discuss gods like there is only one God or there is a God named God. Neither are true. People of reason should always discuss them as gods or name the specific God. I agree. I think we do that often, and I think that happens to be the case because usually the engagement is with Christians or monotheist. And so it usually just becomes a God, right? Like we don't have, I don't have like Zeus worshipers like making videos 24/7 about how true Zeus is and you should follow him and stuff. So I think it becomes a typical thing that, you know, the engagement in the culture is usually against Abrahamic cults, from Christianity to, you know, Islam, Judaism, things like that. But I think in a philosophical context, you want to be very specific, because I've had a lot of people go, oh, you no longer believe the Bible's true. That doesn't mean there isn't a God, and they're right. And I think the reason a lot of us who've realized the Bible isn't what we thought it was, and we no longer believe the stories in it are true, kind of go toward atheism and agnosticism, is that it was the one God we had. So some of us still hold on to theism. Some of us develop it differently and evolve their form of theism. But a lot of us kind of go, that was literally the only God in the world to me. And now that I question that, my threshold of skepticism on believing any gods exist has gone way up. So I'm going to start with, I don't believe in a God because the God I once believed in, I don't think is believable anymore. And so you're going to need to do something to overturn that. And I think that skepticism starts to step in. And then sometimes over time, people change from being atheist to some form of transition into something else. But it's easy to go from that and pendulum swing because it's the only God you believed in, and it makes sense. Anyway, not what you were asking, but I figure I'd elaborate. No apologies needed. Just happy to see you're here, Wendy, and appreciate you being in the chat. He wrote about book. Okay. Anyway, ducking out. Thanks for the shout out. Of course, Aquarius. Hey, if you're on the Discord and you're still here, hit me up. Gotta support my brother. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Yeah, absolutely. I deconstructed and enjoy life so much better than being a Christian and an atheist now for some time and no problem. Interesting. Isn't it funny how other people have like different experiences and the world is full of that, right? Okay. Am I almost caught up? I think I'm almost caught up. Soul Mighty says, also for checking out real life acts type of healing miracles. Also check out Revival Explosion Ministries. Peter Allman and Revival Explosion are hugely underground and unknown. I have told Christian apologists who make the arguments about these ancient texts and claim the miracles in them are true. They go, that's not sufficient, right? Caleb Jackson, who's a friend of mine, he is trying to make contemporary miracle claims. He wants to vindicate or validate those and suggest, let's show that miracles are happening today, not in ancient texts. You're not going to ever get anyone who's a skeptic of testimony to believe the words of other people who claim the miracles are happening to them. Just on, hey, read this book. This book says it happened. You believe it, right? Because the book says it happened. Well, let's read the Book of Mormon, or let's read, Islam or whatever. It says the moon was split and of course miraculously clearly came back together, whatever. Like you don't just believe it for that reason. So how do you get a skeptic? And he suggests, well, we make a case for modern miracles. I think that's a better approach if you're going to try and convince someone who's already skeptical of miracles, modern miracles, But even one up that would just be let God actually do the miracle to you. Not I found my car keys. Not, I said a prayer and this thing happened, which could have been coincidental, but like biblical miracles would be impressive. Biblical. When I say biblical, I'm talking real world. That does not seem to be possible kind of stuff, Let's see. Have you looked into Buddhist philosophy like Nagarjuna's work? I have not. I've not had the time. Been editing nonstop lately and doing interviews with scholars. This is an example. This is one of the guys I remember when Dyer took this dude to school. That's like the bro kind of like online. That's what I meant by why I did the video I recently did, was that like, it didn't matter what scholar, it didn't matter what video, it didn't matter what topic. It was guys like this with Pikachu freaking like, images on their profiles, popping in on my videos like, Dyer crushed you. You're never going to return from that. And it's like, dude, you're talking about tag argument shit. Let's talk Bible then. Let's actually talk about Bible. I'll grant that there's a God. Cool. Let's fuck around and find out with the Bible. Let's see what happens. You know what I mean? Let's engage with the Gospels. Let's go into Paul's letters. Let's deal with the Septuagint. Let's deal with the Hebrew Bible. Let's deal with your church. Talk about church history since you're Eastern Orthodox. Let's go into the history of the church and their interpretations. And let's get into the weeds of that kind of stuff. Why are we playing games with logic and reason? You must have a God in order to... Okay, cool. I agree. He's used to doing these kind of arguments, and he did a great job. And I obviously was frustrated after 4 hours of dealing with that kind of crap. But I really would love to see, that kind of conversation go down. I don't think he would want to talk about that kind of stuff, to be honest. I don't think that would be his interest to actually engage in the minutia of the texts and engage on the contradictions, engage with the manuscript tradition and understanding the flaws and problems and everything that comes with it. Very much doubt the guy would be interested in that kind of conversation. He would probably bring it back to justify this, justify reason and rationale, that kind of stuff. Wendy says, I grew up learning about the many gods, goddesses, so believing that there may be many was fairly easy for me. I had always why the Christian God was the only God when there are stories of others. That's perfect, valid question to ask. When you know of those stories, and especially when you're young and you're raised to know them, I think that's important because there's countless other stories. I mean, not literally countless, but there's just so many. I love learning about them because I was told one story. One was true, everyone else was wrong. And when you're taught that, it paints a very gray world. Once you've exited Christianity, you realize all the color that the world has, and it's not just this bland one thing. It's so much more beautiful, so much more complicated, and there's so much more to enjoy and dig into. Yes, investigate all that stuff. That seems impossible. Data over dogma. Damn right. Let's see. Why are you fidgeting over resurrection if you can allow for a God? Because I don't think the resurrection happened. And I think that we have good clues as to why we would question such a thing from so many different aspects. I'll give you an example, actually. Let me find an image to give you the example I usually give. See if I can't find it. I used this a long time ago, okay? That's probably a better one. I'm trying to find the one. Let me see if I can get it. That wasn't it. Bear with me, bear with me. This is I had my brother and my brother-in-law actually pretty shocked by what I'm going to show you. And this is a terrible image. I used to have a better quality one of it. So I'm trying to enhance this and see if I can't get it to look better than it does. This sucks. Damn. Let me see if I can't get AI to like enhance this visual, because this is going to be worth me showing you. And improve the quality of this image. ChatGPT can sometimes improve the quality of an image, and it will give it a little bit of a resurrection. See, I do believe in resurrection to some extent. So I'll give you the background as this image is being produced, and then I'll show you the picture myself, so you can actually get a better understanding of my mentality toward the claims of miracles, the fantastic, if you will, resurrections of real people dead and raised from the dead, various other examples, right? And let's see if ChatGPT did its thing. So my brother-in-law, Juan, and my brother, Kurt, both are UFO enthusiasts. They are like totally on board that we are being... they're among us, okay? Aliens are among us. They are absolutely in our atmosphere. They're potentially even probing people, like the whole nine, right? There's all sorts of the alien stuff that they're into, and they think I am too skeptical. They say all the time, Derek, you're just way too skeptical and closed-minded, they said. You're too closed-minded. So one day we were at a Texas Roadhouse when I was up in Washington State, and I told them, guys, I was driving just the other day. Ryan, my wife, was driving, and we were headed back home, and I saw this UFO in the sky, literally above our vehicle, following us all the way home, all the way to my house. And, bro, I did not know what to do with this. So let me make myself full bigger screen to point out. I am telling them, guys, you were right. You were right all along. I should not have been overly skeptical. There's some weird unidentified object that was in the sky right above us. As we're driving, it followed us all the way home. And they went, we told you, you closed-minded asshole. Like we try to tell you aliens are messing with us, dude. Like they are clearly here. The Roswell was real. Everything. You're just too closed-minded, bro. You really need to open your mind and stop being such a skeptic, dude. We try to tell you, and now you know. And I'm like, you're right. No, you guys are right. I should have just taken your word at it. Because look, there's videos and you guys are convinced. You said you've seen things in the sky and you like really believe this. I should have just believed you guys. And then I let that soak for 5-10 minutes as they looked very carefully at this screen and they were like, what is this? Dude, oh my God, I don't know what to make that. And they're like, this is definitely a unique form of UFO. I'm not really sure what to make of this, but they're here and they are absolutely watching us. So finally, after they were done, you know, ha ha ha, I got you, Derek. I stopped and I just said, guys, look, this is bird shit, okay? Bird shit on the windshield of a car, okay? You start with fantastic. You believe you're gullibly gonna be willing to believe the most absurd or less likely position first. Like you don't even think first, you know, maybe a bird pooped and that poop ran down the windshield and it's on the windshield and it followed him home because it's on his windshield the whole time. You immediately thought it was a UFO and all I had to do was just give you what you already kind of thought and were willing to believe and told you a story that on my way home, this thing in the sky right above my car followed me all the way to the house. You believed everything that I just said. And I used this as a teaching moment to tell them why I'm skeptical. Could there be UFOs? Absolutely. I cannot say there aren't. Could there have been a resurrection? Sure. I have no way to know or prove there was never any such thing that could have happened. But if you don't start with, you know, what's more likely? Bird pooped on his window and that's why I followed him all the way home and it was there visibly in front of him the whole way home. Or UFO, if UFO becomes your go-to, your critical thinking skills are not working the way I think they should. You're just going to be a bit naive in life and you're going to fall for anything. You're going to be able to fall for the next con man that's just slick enough to magically slip past your perception and make you not realize he's a bullshitter. If you don't start with, that sounds unbelievable. Sorry, that sounds unbelievable. And I need good evidence, not an ancient book that tells me, but I need good evidence to overcome my skepticism about this UFO, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, you know, Jesus rose from the dead, etc., etc. I'm sorry. I am going to be skeptical. You might come to me and go, but I've had experiences, Derek. But I have experienced things. Are you denying my experience? Not even the slightest. Not even the slightest. And I hope you don't deny mine. Because your experience is yours. And I cannot sit here. I'm not going to try and like pretend you didn't have an experience, but I might have other ways of justifying what I think what I think's going on using science. The brain is a hell of a thing. And so I might approach it again like bird shit on the windshield and say, no, Jesus didn't really come to you, or Elvis did not really eat breakfast with you, right? I'm going to say something else is going on in your mind that's making you believe that, or you think that, or you're hallucinating that, or whatever it may be. I'm going to start there. Then if I get to a place where I don't know the answer, I'll go, oh, I'm not sure. I don't know how to explain that. I just don't go to those conclusions. So the bird poop example image, which I just ran through ChatGPT to have it better because it was very blurry, is a really good one, I think, on teaching why I do not, you know, why this whole question, why are you fidgeting over resurrection if you can allow for a God? Because a God could exist and yet the resurrection still never happened. No reason to think it did. There's many resurrections, by the way, by many other figures in the ancient world. And many of them are also in the physical body, which is also a funny little apologists want to try and get down into the nitty gritty and try to say, no, that doesn't count as resurrection. A resurrection is when a person in the same body is now revivified, but then also is a deity, right? We have a story of Heracles in the 5th century BCE who gets killed by Typhon. I believe it's 5th century. It may even be 2nd century BCE, who gets killed by Typhon and is resurrected by a quail bird. A quail bird is near him. He resurrects from the dead after being killed by Typhon. And of course, we know he goes on to live among the Olympians on Mount Olympus as a god in heaven, right? So it's mind-boggling to me that isn't granted. And so more and more of what I want to do is to get more people acquainted with these things, to know more about these stories and why we should use these kind of critical thinking skills, so we're not gullible and naive and falling for anything we want that tickles our ears or makes us just feel good, because there are other ways to feel good and make yourself feel good without believing in something that isn't true. Okay, catching up. I did a little ramble there, but it came to mind the bird poop example. I think the bird poop example is a good one. I think it is. Let's see. Scrolling down here. Apples don't fall far from the tree. No, you baited me with that. That's kind of, if you're talking about, I don't know if you're talking about what I said. That was kind of what I was trying to do with my brother-in-law and brother, to tell them that, like, hey, a UFO, you convinced me, man. And then I pulled, and then they were like, oh man, what the hell? And I'm like, did you guys not think to think bird poop on a windshield first? I told you I was in the car. Like, why didn't you think that? Why is that not the first thing that comes to your mind? Instead, it's the most fantastic. Probably because the story I told you doesn't grant or even mention birds. It doesn't mention that this could just be poop on the windshield. It's simply me telling you that, the UFO thing, I doubted the UFO thing. Well, the Gospels portray people doubting Jesus's resurrection. And then all of a sudden, that story overcomes the doubt within the narrative. Guess what? He did rise. The doubter believes now. Well, that's the story I gave them, but the facts was not in the story at all. The fact was a bird pooped on this window, and it looks like an unidentified object in the sky, so the Gospels might actually have a completely tainted agenda of telling you a story without giving you inside explanations that actually may be the reality behind why the resurrection stories, why they said he died and rose again from the dead. And there are many alternative, better plausible explanations, just like poop on a windshield here for this one, for the resurrection of Jesus, from mythic to psychological and sociological. There are many other explanations that make better sense. In a literary approach is another one that doesn't get factored in enough. So that was the point. If that's what you're talking to me, Saul Almighty. Let me see. I'm beyond certain that in the vastness of this universe, we aren't alone. I think that we aren't alone. I do think there's life out there. No doubt, Wendy. Okay. I absolutely fooled them. We are DNA. Nothing worse than bird shit when you are high. Denver. Yes, I did fool them. Andrew, absolutely. No joke. Looks shopped. I did run the image. The original image was very blurry, just so everybody knows. It was the one I had that was back in the day, I found on Facebook, and it was actually an image someone took with their phone, and they tricked me. That's why I used it. They tricked me when I read the post. I'm like, huh? And then they finally at the bottom get you with this little, you never thought it was bird poop at first, did you? No, because the story they led up with did not even leave it as a possible answer. And they're BSing you the whole time. And then at the end, they tell you, oh, well, the Gospels don't tell you, we were inspired by other stories, or one dude saw it. Now everyone else is like thinking that they're hearing or seeing, or post-bereavement explanations. There's all sorts of potential depending on what approach you want to take on explaining the resurrection. But all of those bird poop on a windshield are more likely than that was a UFO in the sky. That's not to say that it wasn't. It's the least probable out of all of the explanations, and it's right in front of our nose. And that's why I approach the resurrection this way, because there's so much. Is that on your windscreen? That was a picture off the internet. So I'm probably just catching up. Maybe I'm behind. Oh, I got them so good because they always talk crap about how skeptical I am. And we debate. Me, my brother-in-law, and my brother, we debate all the time about this. Sometimes it gets heated. And we just go at it. I'm like, bro, why are we not first starting with the Scooby-Doo philosophy? Every episode, there's a demon, there's a ghost, there's a monster. And then you find out, you pull the mask off and you find out who the person is behind the demon, the ghost, the monster. It's always unmasking a human. Someone behind it is human. And I think that's important before we jump to the conclusions. There's different ways to think of it. Anyway. Well, alien shit? Absolutely, Doc. Absolutely. Yep. I think it's funny. I always get a laugh when I think back about it because it got me, you know. Dude, this is so bottom of the barrel right here. We know where you come from. That's good luck, Derek. Absolutely. Well played, Derek. Yes, it was. I have to give myself a little credit. Why is Jesus so angry? That's a good question. Depends on where you read, of course, where he's angry at. He's definitely angry in the temple when he's whipping them. You know, ascension is the kicker. Resurrection is not beyond explanation. True. Floating up into a cloud, right? Let's see. Interview people that can verify their miracles. Someone said, I don't know how you could verify a miracle. You can give a testimony. You can tell a story. You can say, hey, I once had cancer and now I don't. And I said prayers and it worked. I don't know how you'd verify the miracle, though, other than the fact that your cancer is now gone. And there's all sorts of explanations to possibly make sense of that. The Bible makes no mention of any physical resurrections. Derek's confused. It references spiritual resurrections. Of course. Yeah. Yeah, that's why he was eating fish in Luke and John. But there is a debate over the idea of what Paul's view of resurrection is. And it isn't just spiritual resurrection that is in the Bible, just like there isn't one form of hell or one doctrine. There's various different views. And it seems apparent that Luke and John want to really capitalize on the flesh, that Jesus is in a body, a physical body. You know what I mean? Scroll on down here. Someone said apologists ridicule the swoon theory, but it's a lot more plausible than a dude literally rising from the dead. 100%. No doubt. I agree. Something they themselves agree has never happened in history apart from Jesus. I agree. And they make fun of it when they're critiquing within debates. Like William Lane Craig, I could see laughing about, are you kidding me? And then he'll go to John where the spear penetrates the side and blood comes pouring out or whatever. And he thinks that that's silly, right? To have the idea that maybe a guy didn't die, but somehow lives on and they see him after, like, what? You're here. The other option is just to say Jesus had a twin. Why couldn't we? Isn't there movies like that where all along you thought the one person existed? I think Dexter is an example. In the recent Dexter episode, they're murderers and they go to visit and the serial killers meet at this mansion and he's like killing off one by one each of the serial killers. And when he kills the one, then the twin shows up. The twin brother of the guy shows up at the mansion and he's thinking, holy shit, that's more plausible that there was an identical twin of Jesus that looks like Jesus walking around after, and they're like, he's alive. Holy crap. And then he just disappears or something. I mean, all of that seems more likely to me than literally he rose from the dead. That's just Seems to be obvious to me. Even though I don't think that's what happened. I just don't think that's what actually occurred. It would make better sense, though. Didymus Thomas, his literal twin, saw an opening and ran with it. Could have. And that's kind of where I was getting at. Did you already write that before I even thought that? I'm wondering if I'm so far behind and you literally already said that. Why do atheists troll God, but breathing God's air that humans can't make? My gosh. Someone help me. Daniel, thank you for the super chat, Daniel. Appreciate that. I love this channel. I didn't even see your super chat pop up. Sorry about that. Thanks for introducing us to the work of some great scholars, and I like that even now you have the ability to change your mind. I should try to always have that. Really appreciate that. I am changing my mind on all sorts of stuff as I continue to learn. And that's part of learning, right? That's part of the whole process. Thank you for the super chat, Daniel, again. And we have more scholars coming. I want to do a lot more. If God turn off the air, can humans turn the air back on? Dude, this has got to be somebody trolling us. This is funny. What's happening? What is happening? Turn the air on. Turn the air on. Someone, one of you humans having God powers, turn the air on. I can't breathe. How would any gospel writer or companion even know? The all dipped after the arrest. Yeah, they're terrified for their life, right? You think they're going to freaking show up around the place where, you know, Romans and other Jews who just had their dude killed are just going to be popping up around there and potentially get arrested and killed like all the other examples Josephus depicts, from Theudas, Judas the Galilean, the Egyptian? Their followers are in danger and they're trying not to get their asses killed. So, yeah, there's some holes, I think, in the narrative. Identical twins. Yes, Saul Almighty. Yeah, but remember how if you watched the Dexter episode, this is a spoiler, so don't be mad at me if you haven't. You really should watch it if you haven't. He kills one of the serial killers and like gets rid of the body like he usually does, Dexter style, and then shows up at the mansion and that guy he killed is in the mansion. And he's looking at him all funny and Dexter's like, "What's going on?" You know, you're hearing his thoughts, but you're not hearing his words. And they're narrating his thoughts. And he's like, "What? I already killed you. What is it? How did he survive?" Come to find out, the way that this other murderer was murdering, it's because he had a twin brother. He was capable of doing the murders he did. But Jesus could have had a twin, and we do have tradition that says Didymus Thomas, right? So that could explain some of this. Who knows? Yeah, my boy. What up? What up? James Apperson. LOL. Derek said Dexter, and I was thinking of the shows my kids used to watch. I was thinking, man, cartoons sure have gotten darker. Oh. Let's see. So deep. Human can't make oxygen, but plants can. God is such a prankster. Another good follow who talks about the air going to be turned off is Jay Dreamer's channel, The Good Vibe Tribe. That's what most people think, I believe. First, someone embellished he rose from the dead and ascended. Then people added the physical elements in later books, like he appeared to his disciples, he preached the many and prophesied and so on. Could be the case. I don't pretend to know, but I know the working models of various scholars and how they do it. It's just, I'm so much more just like even the 1 Corinthians 15 section. I I don't even know if we should be so confident Paul wrote that. I'm a little skeptical here. I really am. I'm a bit more skeptical than I think that many of the scholars who just think Paul wrote those words in that text. And if he did, my skepticism would start with, did he make that up? He appeared to 12. He appeared to Cephas. He appeared to James and the apostles. He appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters, and some are still alive. And last of all, he appeared to me. Why wouldn't we say that was like they're making that up? Why would we suppose they aren't making that up? Well, we have other examples of people having experiences and thinking they saw Mary or thinking they saw things, but they didn't see things. Okay, that's one option. But I don't know why making up shit isn't another option just as plausible. I just don't understand why that's not, like the bird shit on the windshield, one of the first things you would do, say, somebody's making up appearances here. Someone's saying that he appeared to all of us. Maybe they're all mystical and they're having meditative states or dreams and having experiences. And sure, he appeared to me in some fashion. Apologists don't typically do that, though. They say he appeared to the 12 as if in like one setting. And he appeared to more than 500 brethren and sisters at once, right? So, okay, now we got to explain this. How do we explain this criteria? I would start with questioning, first of all, did he make this up? Did he even write this, or did he make this up? And then if he didn't make this up, and there really were people who had experiences, well, these are visionary, obviously. How do we explain that? Notice, though, we're willing to do that whole, this really happened, these are real visions, and let's explain that through some type of natural means. When we get to the Gospels, though, we go legend, fiction, made up, they fabricated. But we don't do that with 1 Corinthians 15, mostly as scholars. And I think we should probably apply some of this to Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, just like we might look at Joseph Smith as an example of a cult leader who makes claims about seeing golden tablets and such, and eyewitnesses claim they saw those things. And you have to ask yourself, did they really see those things? Is he making up that he saw real golden plates? Why do we trust that he saw golden plates? Should we not say that maybe he made that up? And even then, is it really ridiculous and impossible to think someone saw golden plates? And so there's all sorts of questions. All sorts of questions. Where are we at? Where am I at? You're right to be skeptical, Derek. Thank you. I am not, I'm open and playing in the sandbox all the way, though. I'm not so skeptical that I die on the hill that he didn't write it or that he made it up. I'm saying these are options. The data we have is not what I believe Christian apologists wish it was. It just isn't. And we know that they're fabricating eyewitness testimonies. 2 Peter in the New Testament, 2 Peter, 1 John. This is an anonymous author writing in the style, of course, in continuity with John's gospel. Hugo Mendes points out, I think definitively, with really, really confident arguments showing that John's epilogue is not eyewitness. They're writing stories, ladies and gentlemen. And we get to Paul and we go, now he's not making this up. This guy really is telling you about the experiences they all had at the time. We should trust this because it's in his letters. I'm just very skeptical. So ultimately, I would say I'm ultimately an agnostic on not knowing if there is something out there. But I don't believe there is God. I don't believe there is a God right now. I'm not convinced, but I am ultimately I don't know there isn't something out there. And the reason I would say I'm an atheist in that sense is that all the versions of God through history, gods through history, were perceptions of man. We are the ones who thought there must have been a constructor of the earth. Because if not, how did it get built? How is it here? Oh, well, we have the idea that there must have been a giant God that made the earth. And so various myths come along, such as Tiamat, right? A giant goddess. It gets split in half, and we make the heavens, and we make the water underneath the earth, and the earth from our body. So these giant gods are what created the earth, and there's various different kinds of ways the creation happens. And I just go, all of these are human ideas to explain the world we live in. And I think that that's just a human idea. So when people go, do you believe in a God? I go, no, I think the whole concept is man-made. And naturally we would intuit it's man-made because we're wondering how did it get here? And so I just don't think that a God had to make this in order for that to be, which creates further back questions before the Big Bang, or if there was a before the Big Bang, or is the universe eternal, and all these questions that can come up. I don't know all the answers to. And I don't know if we ever will know all these answers. Someone says making stuff up for the relics to put in their churches. That happened a lot. So it wasn't just the biblical text that there were forgeries and things like that in the textual tradition. They're now making up, like, I got the foreskin of Peter and I've got the, the thumb bone of Paul. Come down here to this relic, check it out, throw me a few shekels and we'll be good. Servant of God warrior says, you're blind. You are not close to God, so no way you can discernment. Wake up. Then you eat his body and blood and overcome the self-doubt in your divinity, because they promised. I have to keep telling the Christians, how are you going to convince me Jesus really rose from the dead without first convincing me that he was even real? Oh, look at the name, the Great Jesus Mythicist. Would you tackle the ahadiths? Oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. Maybe one day. I mean, I'm already dealing with the human origins of the Quran, right? And so maybe eventually I start tackling some of the ideas that we find in the hadith. But dude, if I understand properly, that is so much material. Like the hadiths have been written for, there's so much. It's like tackling all the rabbinic literature or something. Like, it's like, what? There's too much going on. I'd probably fall asleep halfway through the first like couple pages. And this would have to be through translation, of course, too. So I don't know the Hebrew or the Arabic. You just had Professor Baden, I believe you mean, an expert on the Hebrew scriptures, tell you that the Greek Septuagint was written before the Hebrew scriptures were written in Hebrew. Baden does not think the Greek Septuagint was written before the Hebrew. I don't know why you would. Where's this coming from, dude? Yeah, so this My Woodland has an interesting comment. Why haven't we seen anything in our lifetime? I can see science. I cannot see faith or belief. And then someone says, you ain't been looking right. That would make the most sense. I mean, you go far enough back, there wasn't just a god. There was always a wife of the god, a consort, someone along with the god. Polytheism. If the Exodus never happened, doesn't that set off a domino effect where there was no covenant, which means Jesus didn't fulfill anything? So what's the point in believing he rose from the dead? You could argue that. I've heard people even go back to Adam. If Adam and Eve never existed and that's a complete story, mythology, then, the original fall story of Adam and Eve, and the whole reason we're in this predicament, according to the Christian doctrine, is that we are fallen short. We are sinners. We need the atoning work of Jesus in order to be saved from that original sin that a lot of Christians seem to teach. Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose? If Adam never really did fall, there was no Adam and Eve to fall. So how did we end up in this predicament? I've heard it that way as well. So there's like different ways you could tackle this, I suspect. So what's he dying for if Adam and Eve never fell, causing us to end up in a fallen state? Lisa says, hell, Derek, agnostic atheist myself. Maybe God's a force or the universe itself. That's Spinoza kind of view. The eye of God nebula looks promising, intriguing. Let's see. Look it up. I'm scrolling down. Asher was like, I'm out. Hold on. Really? So really says, please go back and watch your interview, please. Well, I have Joel Baden's number, and I could just, I can email him too, probably out of respect. It might be worth emailing. It's been years. I'm pretty fairly certain that if he did say something like that, I guarantee you he misspoke. If he said the Greek came before the Hebrew of Scripture, I can't imagine that he thinks that the Greek outdates the Hebrew of any biblical literature. Now, that is not to say there aren't examples of certain books within the Bible that appear to be originally in Greek. There are certain books that are just written at that time, very late in the game, but no. The overall Torah and various prophets and such, he would say, are Hebrew or Aramaic originally and then translated into Greek later. And that is like, you just read his books. If you haven't read his books and you've only watched videos that we've done interviews, it's easy to make mistakes when I'm talking. I'm sure even during this 2 hours live stream, I've said things, not realizing I've said things out of line or mistaken. So I would just ask that you read maybe Joe Baden's book. That might help. I'm finding not much insight in this chat. There's a lot of definitely like, whoa. Oh, Doc Pleroma not in the house. Doc, praise you. Hallelujah. Look, man, I just blessed you in angel language, so no one understood it but me and you. Consideration. If Jesus is stoned for blasphemy or dies quietly nursing lepers, does Paul have anything to preach? Crucified Messiah theology seems parasitic on Roman execution, not Jesus himself. Huh. Interesting. Does Paul have anything to preach? I mean, where would it, if he died by died quietly, of course, with lepers or stoned to death, crucified Messiah theology would seem a bit like, why would he be preaching that? Where'd that come from? Why would he think he was crucified? But then there's also, you said, seems parasitic on Roman execution, not Jesus himself. I'm not sure I'm completely tracking on your point or what you're trying to get at here. Because I know there's some people who think that the real historical Jesus would have likely, there's some people, and I don't think this is the most popular view, but that he would have been stoned and killed by the Jews. The same way James, for example, in Josephus is killed being a lawbreaker, according to Josephus. He's stoned to death after being thrown off the precipice of the corner of the temple. And I was there at the temple. That drop is no joke. I don't know how someone would survive that fall, let alone if they're like barely alive, they stoned them to death after that. That would be weird. So I'm looking for you, Doc. Help me out. Clarify it. It is always Jesus plus the cross, you said. Yes. Paul is commenting on Roman imperialism. The cross is needed. Interesting. Okay. That's one way to possibly look at it. I don't see why it wouldn't be possible, especially with Jews being crucified all the time by Roman, imperialism and crucifixion, by Philo of Alexandria and Josephus talking about that all the time with Jews. I wouldn't I wouldn't turn it down as an option, you know. I would not. Warlight says, certain scholars were on History Valley a long time ago. I forget names. They believed the Qumran sect was high on shrooms and other psychedelics when they wrote sectarian books. I mean, that's possible that people are writing some experiences here and there. But when you read about like the Apocalypse of John and how it was constructed, you don't need to posit a hallucination explanation for the creation of such a visionary text. It's a fiction that is written in visionary form with 7 fake letters in them to the 7 churches, which are in Asia. And they're not real letters. But that whole genre did not demand he hit a pipe right before he started writing this or do a mushroom experience and then describe the events that happened. It's a literary narrative, if you will, apocalyptic narrative about the end. And I think that's more likely. That's not to say people weren't doing drugs all the time or some forms of psychedelics and experiencing stuff. They sure were. I'm sure they were. But I just don't I don't think that needs to be the explanation for everything. And a lot of people who are looking for drugs in the ancient world look for it in everything, it seems. And they take words that don't explicitly mean or say that, and they'll make those words become things that they aren't necessarily. And that's the other problem I have, is jumping to conclusions without it being well defined within the text, the primary sources that you're looking at. That's a big issue. Well, very well articulated by Dom Crossan. I should get Dom over here. Dom's getting up there in age, man. Dom is getting up there. He's going to have his apotheosis soon. I mean, he's 93, I think, or something. And he lives 30 minutes from me. So I probably need to get him over here to talk about more while he's still thinking clearly and, you know, do something like that. Okay, look, I'm going to wrap things up and I'm going to get back to editing. I've got 8 videos to edit right now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to continue to get scholars to come on the channel. I really, really appreciate everybody tuning in. It's been a minute since I've done a live stream, and I hope everyone is well. Thanks for the super chats, everybody. It goes a long way in helping us out. If you haven't joined the Patreon already or become a YouTube member, consider doing that. I always drop my videos early access on there to give you front row seat. On Patreon, you can private message me, and you give me ideas as well, or scholarly ideas, different things, so we can personally connect that way, and it helps the channel keep going. YouTube has been hurting everyone financially, and I speak about that from I've spoken to, just in the past month, over 12.5, almost 24 other YouTubers, and everyone is experiencing issues with the overall way things are going on YouTube at this moment. So if you like a channel that's bringing education, if you enjoy a content creator that is helping you, make sure they don't go extinct, make sure they don't disappear, support that YouTuber. If you like what I'm doing, support me. If you don't. And if you can't afford to, there are ways of doing that for free through liking, commenting, sharing it out to your communities, subscribing so you get notified, so you're here whenever we do these. There's all sorts of options, but it's been a hell of a last 6 months on YouTube. It's just crazy. I think they're trying to compete with TikTok. So there's 2 things they're really implementing, and that is newer YouTube channels are getting front row seat because they're trying to do like TikTok. You start a TikTok now, you'll end up getting you can blast off to the top, even though you don't have a fan base. They'll promote you because you're a brand new content creator. And so YouTube is trying to, I think, expand like TikTok, and they're competing. So they're trying to get new people to pop in. But when they do that, they're neglecting the fan and audience of already existing established channels who've been doing this for years, sometimes even over a decade. And it's problematic, especially when you're trying to set up your life and be consistent on maintaining that income that you're making through the ad revenue and providing for your family. So it sucks. It sucks for people who've been there, who've grown, who spent a lot of time growing the platform, when they've taken their eye off of promoting the content that you have and just suggesting brand new content instead. There's also AI to factor into this. So AI is like literally flooding all of the YouTube and other algorithms. And it's just, there's all sorts of stuff to factor in. So anyway, just figure I'd come hang out with you for this live stream. I need to set up a weekly live stream where you know what date and time, and you can come and we can start hanging out and doing something cool. I'm also going to start interviewing people who've deconverted or gone and left harmful forms of religion to a better place. I'm going to do that again and bring in ex-Muslims, ex-Christians, and people who've like are ex-fundamentalists who might remain theists in some ways and things like that. So I'm really interested in doing that again because the story time was always good. I loved it. It'd be really cool to get more scholars as well. So before I go, I'm going to just make sure I see you all here. Make sure I got you. Scrolling here. Doc says it's called alt channels. You know this though, Derek? Alt channels. What's called alt channels? I'm not sure I do know what you're talking about. Myth Vision Podcast. I have no idea how you tolerate your chat. Oftentimes I skip over things that I just think, you know, someone's having like one hell of a life and they repeat the same thing and they seem to be like I don't know. But I do look for like people who are trying to communicate with me when I scroll through my chat, and I usually just ignore stuff that just seems like, did they take their medicine or not today? You know, there's a lot of that happens in the live streams. So I'm just being honest. I'm like, okay. Derek denies drugs in the Bible for some strange reason. It's weird. Ruck, McDonald, Allegro, all three agree the Bible was inspired by garden drug experience. So this idea that I deny drugs in the Bible, I find that interesting that you would just flat out say that. And then you must come from the Ammonite sphere, these name drops that you're bringing in. Number one, I don't deny there are drugs in the Bible. I just would say, give me really conclusive arguments where they show up. Don't just assume apple means, you know, psilocybin mushroom or something like that, or the fruit of a tree must mean something like drugs. Okay. I'm very, very cautious on jumping to the secret meanings of words behind them. Are that psilocybin or that particular drug thing? And McDonald, I don't think he does. So here, just because I have Ruck's number, but he's 90 something years old. He's like 95. What I will do, just to show you, Dennis McDonald, since you name dropped him, let's go ahead and debunk this guy right here, Mycology. If I'm right, Dennis can answer. And he'll probably have a more nuanced scholarly approach. But the way you say, Ruck, McDonald, Allegro, all three agree the Bible was inspired by garden drug experiences. I'll read and ask Dennis McDonald and then Mycology in Botonomy.
Hi, Derek.
Hey, how's it going, Dennis? Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I won't keep you long. I'm live on YouTube right now. Someone says Derek denies drugs in the Bible for some strange reason, which I don't deny them. I just show me the evidence, right? Give me, because I know they've shown like hash on particular altars and stuff from archaeology, things like that, right? But then they say it's weird. Carl Ruck, Dennis McDonald, and John M. Allegro, all three agree the Bible was inspired by garden drug experience. And I know you, so I figure let's debunk this guy on the spot here. I've never heard you say anything of the sort that all three would, this includes you, that the Bible was inspired by garden drug experiences or experience.
I've actually been on podcasts at least twice opposing that position.
So you don't say that?
No, I don't say that. What I think is probably right is that in those cultures there was use of hallucinogens.
Of course.
And we know that from Homer, because Homer's got drugs and so on. But I see no evidence whatsoever that you have that kind of hallucinating going on in at least the New Testament.
Yeah.
And I'm not an authority on the Hebrew Bible,
Of
so
course.
it could be that, yeah.
Yeah, so you've never said that. This is a false statement by someone using your name, though, assuming you do say that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that's, yeah, I've opposed it.
Okay. Okay. So look, I know Carl Ruck does, especially within Greek stories, because they did do this stuff, and no one is denying. They're also lying about me saying there isn't something there. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just not convinced. Like, give me a clear example, and then I'll be persuaded. Right? That's kind of how you feel about it, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I'd have to say.
Yeah. Okay. So that's just, it's interesting because they're saying that on our last interview that I had launched, that you said this in your last interview with me. So, I've never heard you say that they were doing this. That the Bible is saying that they were doing drugs. So, and I interviewed you. So that's why I was like, hold on, I've never heard you say this, but this person knows better than you and me on what we talked about. So I just think it's weird that's in my live stream. Anyway, I just figured I'd ask you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. How's everything? You doing okay? Everything good?
You're on live, so I'm not going to tell you.
All right. I'll call you sometime later. How's that sound?
Okay. No, I'm doing okay.
Good to hear from you, Dennis.
Bye-bye.
Okay, brother. Bye. Okay. So now that we heard that, right, from Dennis, all right, if I pull up that video, right, and Dennis doesn't say what you're saying, mycology, what then? What do we do if Dennis isn't saying exactly what you're saying that he's saying, that the Bible teaches this? What are we going to do? What do we do, ladies and gentlemen, if that happens? Should mycology change his name and then come under a different name and then pretend that they're not really the person that just did that or something? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Like, you got me wanting to pull it. Which video is it, mycology? Is it the one about the garden scene and how to properly understand the naked young man running away? Is that the one you're talking about that I launched recently? Because I imagine that's probably the one you're talking about. Let me see. Yeah, this was Twisted, right? The naked young man mystery. 17. We got to get a little context in. So we're going to do this. Watch Dennis's last interview. Don't take Derek's word for it, right? Okay. So they're still pushing it. So let's don't take Dennis's word about what Dennis has to say either, clearly. Because this person knows. So let's see what we have here, right? This is the one. Got it. Let's hear what Dennis says and understand context. Let's start back a little bit. Make sure we have the context here. Like, no. Let me know, everybody, that you can hear this. Let me refresh it just to make sure it's good.
The naked young man.
Because I cannot hear it. So I'm going to make sure my audio is right. I need to be able to hear this. Output, internal speakers. There we go. There we go. I got it. All right, let's go a couple minutes before, see what happens.
And that's a different story.
Of course.
I can give a background to that. But Hillman is tone deaf to Christian baptismal imagery, and he's really tone deaf to the Homeric imitation of Elpaner. And I go back, Plato's famous myth of Ur, and twice in the Aeneid, and once in Lucian, and once in Apuleius.
Just sped it up to 1.25 so we can get there quicker.
We have imitations of this character.
Right.
So I don't know if he was intentionally avoiding those parallels, but the parallels are there.
Just to add icing on the cake, feel free to topple it with a cherry. The very next scene after he's arrested, Jesus is arrested, you would think someone who's skilled in interpreting text in the Greek, all of that, would get to the next chapter, in chapter 15, and take the accusations from the Jews that are giving this kind of kangaroo trial on Jesus. You would think they'd mention that he's this thing that Amon's saying he is. All of that's absent. Like, no, he's not accused of trafficking and doing all this stuff that Amon's claiming that he's. By the way, any Ammonites, which I don't know if mycology is an Ammonite, clearly seems to be coming from that area. When Ruck himself doesn't agree with Amon on these things and the whole Dionysos stuff, that is a young man, not a boy, of fighting age, which agrees with Dennis McDonald and other classicists who are on the same page. What my point was here was the very next scene after he is captured and they have, arrested this trafficker, the accusations in chapter 15 have nothing to do with the very claim that Ammon and Ammonites are saying about Jesus. That was my whole point there. So let's continue. So like common sense tells me, it's this charismatic cult mentality that I think he carries about himself that people are just duped by. And there's nothing I can do or you could do or say, but I would like anyone who thinks, his confidence is pretty wooey and he knows a lot of Greek to take consideration by someone like you who has 60 years engaging with the Greek. But I would also take it a step further and say that I have actually spoken to Carl Ruck myself. And I know people who've talked to Carl Ruck, which was his doctor fodder. And literally they're like, he's not buying this. So why are they buying it? Other than something isn't right. I don't know.
Yeah,
weird.
Ammonites use the authority of, look, this guy knows he's the authority. Ruck's his daddy, and his daddy has called him out to the carpet many times about him using Dionysos the way he does. His daddy doesn't agree with him, let alone other experts in Greek. But no one, at this point, what Ammon's done is painted himself into a corner where no one really knows the Greek but him. He's the only person on planet Earth who seems to have the secret understanding, who knows the truth. Let's keep going.
Anyway, Dennis, any final words? Cherry on top?
No, I'm so glad we had this conversation. I think this is a mysterious young man. I can understand why people like Morton Smith earlier had some similar thoughts about this naked young man. And the naked young man is in a part of ancient mythologies. And Mark is not against using these Homeric tropes in order to make his gospel work for him, for his readers.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave people with the impression.
So hold on before we continue, because I thought he said 1717. I'm scrolling up here. He said 1717, ladies and gentlemen. Just so we're on the same page, we're at 1719 now, right? Where's the drugs? Liar, liar, pants on fire at this point.
And that there were ancient concoctions of.
So let me back up here. Let's see. 17.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave people with the impression that there were ancient concoctions of psychedelics or.
There were.
There's tons of stuff like that.
Yeah.
The thing is just because you can't use a heuristic approach to just, well, we see it over here, this cult did it, and this is also a cult, therefore association fallacy, and make them also, they may be a purity cult, or this particular version in Mark might not be representing anything like that. So without having explicit data that gives you that and confirms it, don't assume, don't jump to a conclusion. And you see what I'm trying to say.
The only liquid that's in the story is at the Last Supper and wine and so on. And yes, wine can be inebriated, especially for additional elements that are added to it, and
Right.
it often was the case.
Yep.
But
So that's the point you're trying to make right there. That was the case, that they would add inebriating elements to wine, right? I imagine you take that to mean that Dennis thinks that because often there were inebriating elements added to wine, therefore the Bible's wine at the Last Supper was drugs. Wine is a drug, but that there's inebriating elements in it. He doesn't draw that conclusion. He's saying that wine often does, right? So he's not talking about the New Testament's teaching that drugs are inserted in the wine. He simply points out that wine was in the New Testament. If that's what you mean by drugs, well, clearly we're not talking about the same thing as what I think Ruck is highlighting on psychedelics and things like that in the literature. So Dennis himself clearly doesn't draw your conclusion here, and yet you name drop Dennis up here at the top, and you said you said that I don't think there's anything in the Bible, right? Derek denies drugs in the Bible for some strange reason. It's weird. Ruck, McDonald, Allegro, all three agree the Bible was inspired by garden drug experience. Garden drug experience. What the hell? What is this? If you're going to say wine is a drug, then you need to go, okay, well, I mean, they can't drink wine. Wine is a drug. That's silly. That is so silly. That is wild. Yeah, damn. Mycology won. We owe this guy a reward and our deepest apologies. Isn't that funny? I literally just called Dennis McDonald on the phone. This is how delusional people are in that group. I honestly think that the people that are surrounded by Amen, literally, I call the man that they say supports their view, says explicitly on the phone he does not support their view about the drugs and all that kind of stuff. But then when he says wine and that it was common in those days to add inebriating elements to wine, that did not mean they did or that was universal, but it was common in the ancient Greek world and such. That meant the Bible's full of drugs. That's the kind of insanity. And you get the guy himself on the phone. They don't give a fuck about the evidence. They don't care about what he said. They just keep twisting shit to make their point. And it's wild. They do this with Neoniskos. They do this with almost everything. I actually told Steven Nelson at this point, I said, Steven, there's so many delusional people that come into the chat that are dropping these completely out there, left field, just brain rot, convinced of Amen's position, and they cannot actually weigh the evidence apart from what the master told them to say and think about these things, that I don't have any time or interest in engaging them. So what I have begun to do is decide that when I see this kind of brain rot and this really intense stuff going on in the comment section, I have no interest in even allowing them to be on the channel. They distract. Like, you can't even do a video. Let me make this point too. You can't even do a video critiquing Amen, even if you're being respectful in the criticisms, because you don't agree with the guy, without 800 Amenites coming in to defend the cult leader. So it's not even worth doing videos talking about this guy and giving him any oxygen at this point. You might as well not even talk about him anymore. Make sure he's irrelevant anymore, because their fans have caused such a problem in the chats. You can't do it. I think it's not even worth it at this point. He's not taken serious by any expert in the field when it comes to this material. As far as what he's arguing about Mark 14, somehow his work passed peer review, but that's been picked apart, and Steven Nelson has his number, but he won't have that with Steven. He won't challenge Steven at Danny Jones in person on the Greek. He just won't. It's weird. So I'm like, yo, I'm done dealing with these people. I don't need to constantly engage with someone like Amen. It's a distraction. And there's such a headache to deal with the people that are in his chat that it's like, I have no interest in even entertaining them. I want to just ignore them completely and move on with real scholarship, not some fanciful, weird pedo stuff and the strangest, weirdest types of people coming out of the woodwork. I don't need that fan audience. I don't need those. I don't want to cater to them. I have no interest in even entertaining these people. None. Don't give a shit. That's where I'm at with it. Honestly. Literally. Literally. The cult of Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll go ahead and get rid of this this brain rot. And so this guy is a troll. 100% a troll. And he really believes it. You know what I mean? And yeah. And feel like the host. So Apperson says, we get it. You heard and understood it differently. That's how all of them are, literally. And feel like host is being dishonest. We don't need to hear that rephrased 10 different ways. But yeah, that's what they think. But then when I call the guy himself, right? You heard McDonald himself on the call. And then this person still just watched the last video, which we recorded 3 weeks ago, like a month ago, maybe max. I mean, literally 1 month ago. And then Dennis said, I've done 2-3 episodes actually being interviewed. explaining why I don't think that that's the case. But then he mentioned simply that wine in the ancient world had inebriations inserted into it. There you go. He believes that the Bible has drugs in it and stuff. And it's like, that's not what McDonald said. It's being dishonest. And that's not me saying that I don't think that there could be potentially terms in the Bible that do seem to refer to potentially psychedelics or something. I'm just needing clear, definitive evidence. I'm not going to assume, hey, there's a Greek cult that practices this, or in Egypt, they did psychedelics here. They did this, they did that. Therefore, in your Bible, there's evidence of this drug here, and there's no clear saying that they did this and it made them intoxicated or lose their minds. Now, there may be. I'll give you an example. And here's me going out beyond what this person actually was arguing, because I don't necessarily say there isn't, even though this person wrongly asserted that I do. There's a story in the Old Testament where the soldiers of Israel actually go after each other. They get belligerent with madness, almost like Dionysus, right? The Maenads go into a mania. Well, in other ancient cults from Odin and such, you have this same mania when it comes to war. It's an Indo-European thing that you could potentially interpret that as them fighting and losing their minds and bloodthirsty and killing each other off as some type of mania. Did they ingest this wine that had some other intoxicants? Potentially, but not definitively. We cannot assume, okay, I found an altar with THC residue on it, therefore the Bible's loaded with drugs. And all of these terms are secret terms that actually mean drug terms. I don't buy that. That's where I disagree with Allegro on those things. I don't think it's definitive. And I've heard several other experts who are linguists who look at it and go, nah, I'm not looking at through mushrooms to try and explain all this material. But that's just wild to me. Like if I commented in a live stream ever, ladies and gentlemen, and I challenged the person, said, you're wrong, and name dropped the scholar, and that person called the scholar, and the scholar said, I do not think that. And then they double down in front of the fact they literally don't think that. And they say, well, watch the last episode. You literally said it. Then you play it and you realize, no, he's not saying it's in the Bible. He's saying that it was common that people put inebriating stuff in wine. What is that except for madness, honestly? Like, just take the L and realize, okay, I misstated my confidence on what he meant by that. I was wrong. I should have been more careful and not assumed that this scholar does agree with this position that I'm pushing. My bad. No. Just kept going about, and that's an ammonite for you, you know? So what do you do, right? What do you do? What do you do? Oh my God, he's gone. Temple of Brutus. Oh God, here we go with another one. So get ready for a block. Let's see. No, all these people on here are trying to make money, including Derek and McDonald and Carrier and all of them. By the way, this is the perfect time. I hope the Ammonites clip this and take this back to their master, because Temple of Brutus is Temple of Ammon. I guarantee you this guy's another one of them. I don't know if you knew this, and you probably don't because you weren't close to Ammon, and none of the modern Ammonites seem to be as close to Ammon as Nil was before Ammon changed, and the greed in terms of his fame and his authority as a cult leader started to set in. Ammon lives off the government. Ammon, and that is not to shit on people who need government assistance, but Ammon has full capability of being able to pay for bills and pay for a living and have a way to live a life where he can afford it. With the audience he's built, the name he's built, he has enough Ammonites on there that could chip in a little money, or even just watching his videos without chipping in, he could afford to pay his bills. But he lives off government assistance. This guy literally has housing paid for by the government. My tax paying that I earn through this helps support this guy's living. He's not, he's purposely using this whole grift that, well, I don't get paid, and anyone who does is part of the, what is it called? The brothel. And I love that title, actually. At this point, I'm like, yeah, we're part of the brothel. I don't see anything wrong with the brothel, actually, in my view, if you want to look at it that way. But they come out here like, oh, he doesn't take money. Do you understand that Danny Jones from my rough estimates and hearsay from people who know Danny Jones has like 30,000 Patreon supporters. It's like an insane number of support on Patreon. Okay. When I say insane, we're talking potentially $1 million a year he gets through funding through fans. Amen is on this guy's channel. And if there's a brothel, if a brothel means money-making machine that anyone is part of, Amen is the king of the brothel, because he's literally riding the popularity and, of course, the coattail of Danny Jones and Danny Jones's podcast, and even caters to Danny Jones putting all this stuff on early access on Patreon, so only paid members can watch and access this stuff. So when the noble Ammonites come out talking about how noble Ammon is for not making money and making a living in what he does, they're blind to their own cult leader and what he's doing for Danny Jones, and also playing a part of that brothel. It's unfortunate. For those who are tuning in to Myth Vision, who do not even know what I'm talking about, probably irrelevant, even wasting my time, because I'm going to continue to block these idiots from even being in my chat, to be honest with you. But every YouTuber I know who does this as a full-time gig is getting paid to take care of their families and provide. And in America, of course, we pay taxes. There's a guy named Ammon who tries to use this and weaponize it against people who make money, who are also social media or content creators or educators or anything like that, as if that's a gotcha. But the guy isn't consistent, because if he was, he wouldn't appear on Danny Jones's brothel. Okay, he wouldn't. Just saying. He's not consistent. If he was such a noble stoic or cynic, so to speak, and non-materialistic, he probably wouldn't even have a house. He'd probably be truly philosophical and consistent in that way. But no, he from what I understand from Neil, and Neil was very close to him, he lives off government assistance, and he has enough followers where just if he put the check for monetization on his channel, he would be able to afford paying all his bills, make more money than he makes off government assistance. But he also has a lot of debt for the colleges that he seems to have had his degrees at and stuff, and doesn't want to have to pay that debt back. And as long as he's on government assistance, he doesn't owe the government any money, or any of the institutions money that he got his funding for in order to get his degree. So there's a massive problem going on with the followers that I find of this guy, and they just don't know what they're doing. They don't know this guy. They don't know what they're doing. And I've never really took the time to vocalize this, but when they did that video, someone sent it to me about my recent anxiety and panic, and talked about greed and whatnot. The only comparison I can give is that I'm a man providing for his family. And there was a time in my past when I was addicted to drugs. I know a thing or two about drugs. I was addicted to drugs, and I was on food stamps, and we did have government assistance at one point in my early youth. I was a kid. I struggled in life, and clearly we lived in a very small house. We did not have much when it came to living in that way, and I was just trying to make it. Finally, you start to do good for yourself, and you provide for your family, and life gets harder sometimes. And so I made this video, and he makes this mockery video of me and talking about the greed and things like that. And I thought it was really, really unfortunate that someone like him would do that when they're literally dependent on the government for their own living, and they could make plenty of money. So that's why I don't know if you all know, for the viewers who are part of the Ammonite crowd or whatever, you do know, you've seen this, but dude, you don't even realize, like, everything you say literally works back 20 times harder onto the cult leader that you're talking about. So anyway, figure I'd give you a whole bunch of insight drama, so to speak. But I think it's a really important point to highlight, right? Here he is. Wow, Derek really touchy about the fact that he makes money off all of us for watching a video. I don't make money off you. You just watch a video, and I get paid from YouTube for you watching the video. To attack that guy so much, nobody cares about Ammon. We care about reality and truth. Jesus was a circus show and drug magic show. That's the nonsense. You know what I'm saying? So these people are absolutely crazy, man. I mean, honestly, I can't get over how ridiculous it is. So, Derek, if you pay me, I'll troll the crap out of Apperson. Amen is a goof. This is what happens when classics training outruns historical method. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Absolutely, Jeff. We all need to make money. Working hard, especially when not duping others, should definitely be respected. I want to say this too, though. This is not a jab at Danny Jones for simply being a great marketer and whatnot, even though I think most of his channel is like conspiracy level crazy stuff that he interviews and does. He's actually a brilliant businessman for what he's doing, but they are hypocrites. Every person who comes at me and does not attack Danny are hypocrites. Danny's making 50 to 100 times more money than I am. Maybe 150 to 200 times more money than I do per year. This guy drops 3 ads per live stream. I mean, per video he launches, he's 3 sponsors. Do you know how much a sponsor pays for a channel that big that gets that many views? You have no clue the kind of money this guy's making on his channel. And Amen is playing a part of that. So don't be a hypocrite, those who follow Amen and talk about money and things like that. Don't be. If you are going to be, you're just clearly doing it because you don't like someone calling out your dude. Lisa, Derek does excellent work very hard. He deserves the money he earns. He is a good family man as well. Of course. Anyone who knows me would know this. That's the bottom line. Derek works hard for money, earns a penny. Of course, he just wanted to make Mad Bank. There's a lot of money to make pandering. If he wanted to make, pandering to fundamentals. Yeah, if I had a conversion tomorrow and ended up doing a circus show on all the apologetic channels, you know why, okay? Unless I have something really happen to me, miraculously happen to me. The whole point of this video was for real. Why should anyone believe Jesus rose from the dead? And we really shouldn't. And I went through my method throughout this video of why. I started with the bird poop example and so much other stuff. But like, to make the point, we shouldn't. And if he had to appear to Thomas in order to overcome his doubts, maybe that's what would have to happen to me. And again, unless that happened, I don't see how I would overcome my skeptical threshold in order to believe it. That's just it. That was the whole point of this video. Now we got another idiot. So this is what they do for anyone who's watching. This is Ammonite 101 nonsense. These are the kinds of people, probably the same dude, but like this is how they operate, and they are insane. Literally insane. If you do a video and let's say you have 1 million subscribers, I encourage you today, do not do a video critiquing Amen if you don't want 1,000 lunatics in your chat attacking and trying to come after you. That's all they do. And they tell each other to email, like even Amen will send them on ahead, like, hey, 500,000 people, I want you to email these professors and harass them about this text. I mean, like literally, he has a cult. My encouragement is avoid this guy. And if I were any wiser, in retrospect, I would have never even given this guy any oxygen from my perception, so that any of his goons who got caught up in this nonsense didn't come to my chat. Literally. That's how toxic these people are. Literally. So what do you do? See, the shameless cash grab and is religion, not scholarship. YouTube. Absolutely. It's huge part. But I thought to myself, when people do make those kind of jabs, you have to ask yourself, like, how's someone supposed to make a living? And what justifies a noble way of making a living to these people? Are they not supposed to work? And if they are, I mean, every one of these audience members that do join Amen's thing, you have to think, what are they doing? Are they working for like secret causes? Are they doing it because they have malicious intent? Are they just grifting? What are they doing their job for? This is clearly something I've done for a long time. So look, he blocks people right away as soon as they start critiquing, and they don't allow it on their channel anyway either. But Warlight says, I've terrorized Amen's Amon Hill's chats for far worse. His trolls do not impress me. Me neither, of course. Yeah, I do need to go east more. I am wanting to actually do that. I'm interviewing, well, we've been emailing a ton of different scholars, a lot of people who are in various fields, not just Bible. I want to expand to deal with religion at large and various other things beyond religion, evolution, science, anthropology, psychology, various fields. And I want to like really make this just a broader educational platform that doesn't just deal with one thing. Classicist. I'm going to have more classicists on. Assyriologist, Sumeriologist. I want to talk about ancient Sumer, Proto-Indo-European scholars that are PhDs. Of course, I want to get into all of that. Like, this is all stuff that I would love to start doing given some time. Yeah. I've wasted enough time. Well, the reason is I was a Christian. So, like, when you come out of Christianity, it's natural to poke the thing you were once, involved in. That seems the most common sense. And it's the environment I live around. So most people are Christian. I think you could take it a step further from there even and say, okay, it's also influencing our social situations, our legal situations. There's a lot of stuff that's involved in why going after, jabbing, and pointing out the flaws and holes of Christianity. Okay, so that's one major reason why it's been a focus, because it's where I come from. But I am wanting to do more. And I like the comparative myth stuff, so maybe that'll allow me to leap over into the East and do things that I haven't already done, Yes, been told by a few scholars about that lately. You know what I mean? Absolutely, I have been told. So it's about time. And if I were to even be able to get a PhD through a university, it would need to be scholarship. I would not be able to afford as rich as people would think I am, right? No, really not. It's one of the reasons I was going through recent stuff with the as you know, Wendy, we've talked on the cell phone about this, because Wendy's also a supporter of what we do here at Myth Vision, and we've been talking, and I had anxiety and panic through every bit of pressure. My brother helped him get off drugs recently. All sorts of stuff in life has just hit me all at once. And there's no way I'd be able to afford going to get my PhD unless I had a scholarship. But then the other problem is how much time that would consume from me being able to provide, because I'm right now the main breadwinner of the house in order to be able to provide an income for our family. So that's the struggle. That is the struggle. Big time. Really says, did you watch the recent debate between Amon Hillman and Luke Groton on Danny Jones? I'll make one more comment about this dude here. I had Steven Nelson sent it to me, told me, dude, watch skip to 1 hour, because they're all singing Kumbaya as if they're buddy and things okay. But then after 1 hour, things go really south for Amon and things start hitting the fan, and Luke Gordon starts calling out Amon on things and things get critical. But I only watched about 30 minutes of it, and just I get tired of listening to the guy, to be honest with you. But Luke Gordon, ultimately, from what I understand, never got into Mark 14, which is unfortunate because we have all been watching for the longest him make claims about that. We were hoping a classicist would engage him head-to-head, toe-to-toe on Mark 14, but Amon did not want to talk about that passage. He did not want to get into those texts. He preferred to go into Epiphanius 400 or 500 years later to try and talk about a strange cult that had a weird teaching. And what's that do to Mark 14? How does that vindicate his claims about Mark 14? So anyway, I wish it would have gone that way, but it never did. And I know it didn't because they told me, and I only got about 30 minutes in, and then I couldn't watch any longer. I was like, dude, this is getting old. Maybe I'll do a reaction at some point. And if part 2 actually does happen, cool. Then they actually engage in Mark 14. But, immediately he went from, this is a very renowned, respected classicist, shook his hand, all the camaraderie that you could get toward Luke Gordon, who's a bona fide classicist, to then taking poop and throwing it at him on his own live streams, literally trying to make himself look better due to the exchange. And his followers just eat it up. They just listen to everything he says. Jeff says, dude, same with me on getting a PhD. I can't afford it, and I make a decent living. I can do the time, but the cost is extraordinary. For me, it's both time and cost. So I would need a scholarship, and I'm not saying that I couldn't leverage something like that with my connections with academics in the field. And I already have ideas for PhD thesis. Like, I have several ideas I could run with. Where do I want to specialize in? I'd want to get the languages under my belt, but the other problem is simply just time. If I could get a scholarship, I'd still have to go, how do I make a living for my family to be able to afford life, you know? And I don't think it's feasible at this moment in my mind, you know? Absolutely. Absolutely. Dude, I have so much going on that's just crazy. It's life. What do? You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, can't mess with an honest bloke. Well, I think that, you know, it's important that anyone is transparent about their life. They don't need to tell everything in their world, but I personally feel that's my philosophy, because when I started YouTube, I did not start with Myth Vision. I started with just a Derek Lambert YouTube channel where I was talking about my drug addiction. I was hooked on heroin and I was injecting it at the end of my run. And I told people things you usually say in a private 12-step room or with a psychologist or a counselor. Most people don't wave their dirty laundry to the world to show their flaws and their scars and their difficulties the way that I wanted to do it, because not only did I realize it helped me in my journey to better myself, but it also helped others, countless others, to get clean off drugs and alcohol all over the world too, by the way. And so that's been my philosophy, and it's kept me from going and being dishonest with the world, but also with myself. I really am a strong believer that if you're honest with yourself, then relapse, for me, for example, someone going back and getting hooked on drugs doesn't even seem feasible. Like, it doesn't even seem like an option, because you're just keeping it real. And if you're keeping it real, you're not hiding secrets. You're not going to go back into a lifestyle that causes you to be in this repetitive cycle. At least that's been my philosophy. Life be doing the life things. Damn right. That is so true. Jesse says, Daniel prophesied the fall of Babylon, then Persia, then Macedonia, and Rome. Isaiah prophesied that the Jews would be scattered for 2,000 years, and their return all came to pass. Scripture is accurate. I don't even think I have time to get into all this. I would just say, anyone who wants to read on Daniel, take the time to go read Daniel yourself. Go read the commentaries. There's a hermeneutic commentary on this. And it's interesting that Rome gets brought up in Daniel, when Rome may not have been the initial target. It would have likely have been Greece when this was written sometime in the 160s, 170s BCE. The idea that it prophesied that Jews would be scattered for 2,000 years and the return, show me that in the text. Such bullshit. I don't have time to go into all of it, but sorry, you're just wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to go and continue editing. I've got 8 videos to edit. I've got a ton of other material that I've got to get done. I've got some emails I need to send out. I have some reactions to do. My life never ends in terms of work. And I hope that you stick around. We'll be on for more live streams in the future. Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Like the video, comment down below, share it out there, and subscribe. Never forget, we are Myth Vision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.